go to address fluctuation on contract without fluctuation clauses in today Nigeria? Well, if you have at the mercy of whoever is at the mercy of whoever is administering that project to you, and you have no 100% right whatsoever to move him to do whatsoever you wish or desire, you are just at his mercy. But to an extent, a scratcher claim can also help if that contract or the client per se or the client representative is able to graciously deducing from the name, give you something so reasonable that can help you maybe cover some of your lapses or shortfalls due to fluctuations. Let me just put it to us clearly. We should not allow such circumstance arise because you are just like in between the devil and the deep blue sea. You can either be this way or that way. But most often it's better for us to get this clear so that we don't fall into circumstances we become so vulnerable and pleading and begging and crying. To that extent, I think if that is given, it will help you a bit. But don't leverage, don't put your hope on such claims as Gracia that it will help you to come out of situations that you have already put yourself into. Why not? Because you did not take the due diligence to put those clauses in place. Thank you.
Thank you. So the client are not gracious enough. I'm choosing them different policy chapter. Starting how far it could go depends on the level of position. There are positions that can be covered with a regression, but there are levels that it will go. Then it can be covered again. For example, if a project had cement at base cost of 3,800 naira and it goes as high as 5,200 naira as that today, I don't think there is any express claim anywhere that could cover for that depth of fluctuation. So, to my own say, I would say that it depends on the level of fluctuation to know if a claim can actually cover the fluctuation or we should go for the fluctuation claims.
All right, thank you so much about that.
Any further hand? Okay. We have the.
I'm Nuruddin Negile, Edo chapter. The question you asked, as Gracia claim, how far can it go to address fluctuation claim? I want to give you an example. For those of us that are familiar with MDG projects, there was this project that the way it was structured, that there was not going to be any fluctuation claim. All the contractors that took that project knew right from the word go that there was not going to be fluctuation claim. But it got to a stage that even the operators of that MDG knew the contractors were going through turbulent times, especially those who were working in the riverine area. For you to transport a bag of cement or a strip of sand to a place like Ogula, which is the last village facing Atlantic Ocean in Delta State, they knew what it was. So the government or the operators of that scheme decided to give an ex gratia claim. For those in the riverine area, got as far as 49%. But those upland riverine area got 25%. And they were all happy. The same happened to those who were in the Mabila Plateau and so on. A certain percentage was given to them. That what cushioned the effect of the fluctuation to some extent. And the contractors were happy. So I believe to some extent, ex gratia claim can go a long way in ameliorating the hardship of the contractors in terms of fluctuation claim. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, one last response and we're back to you.
Thank you very much. For the purpose of the people that are going to be inducted, this is a workshop. And the essence is for you to take some things home. That question is very, very tricky. The first response, if you do that in the exam, you know the examiner will just mark you down. When you see a question like this, what is ex gratia claim? Simple. It's a non-contractual claim. The examiner will just mark you off, not by telling stories. Haven't defined what is ex gratia. Then, if you look at it, say how far. Like Oga said, it depends on the type of contract that you are using. Like in the FIDIC Red Book. In the FIDIC Red Book, there is a threshold that once the fluctuation in price is beyond 10%, for instance, in FIDIC Red Book, all of you try and get FIDIC Red Book. Read all the Red Book. The silver, the red, the yellow, go and read them. Just don't limit yourself to your JCT in building. Now, to answer that question, how far do you know? The FIDIC is saying once fluctuation is 10% beyond the initial amount, the contractor is due for fluctuation. Assuming you are not using Red Book, if you are to handle that, and like Oga Nuruddin said, as a consultant, you have to be judgmental now. You know actually that, oh, fluctuation is eating as occurred. For instance, if the project is, let's say, 20 months, the contractor cannot start claiming in the first 5 months. If you come, I will not welcome it. Because fluctuation is not supposed to be eaten up in the first 5 months. I cannot say, okay, Mr. Contractor, at 8 months, we will now agree on the percentage on every valuation that you are bringing. At the 10th valuation, we negotiate. We are giving you 15% on whatever you do. At the 15th month, you are entitled to 20%. You will, cascade it down. You will calibrate it in such a way that you make sure that in the first 8 months, depending on the contract period, that is where you are going to be judgmental and use your professional opinion and judgment. So that is right. Because he's not contractor, he's not in the condition. He's not entitled to it. It's not contractor. That is how we handle it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that contributions. Now, the essence of that question, I know that the elders are in the house and they will always guide us right. So thank you, sirs, for all that you have just done. Now, let us get back to what we're here. We know very well that fluctuation is only talking about the hike or the dip in the prices of construction materials. But sometimes, reasonably, just like I've said before, the client is not supposed to bear every form of fluctuation on the contracts. The contractor is not expected to have some of these, to cushion some of the fluctuations that will exist on the project. But one of the things that we need to understand also that when you want a contractor to cushion them, he should know from the very beginning. That was the discourse, some of the conflicts that we were having yesterday, when somebody was opening up and projecting that we can give as much as 70%. And another person was saying, no, taking that 70% might not be healthy for you as a contractor because you actually need to prepare for it. One important document that should guide your decision, whether you're taking 70% or not, is your cash flow. And you don't just wake up because the client is offering you 70% or 100%. You just wake up and want to take it. When you're taking 80%, that 80% that you're going to receive, quote and unquote, was not considered in your rates. Don't forget that you're going to be providing advance payment guarantee, which is a cost for you. And you did not consider this in when you were preparing your rates. So if the person trusts it on you, more or less, you're going to be losing the equivalent of that value for procuring that advance payment from your profit. But of course, you can do away with it because this is Nigeria. But one of the things that we want us to understand is that as a contractor, always make sure that your estimating takes care of some of these little projections. And of course, how can you know? We have places that you can always get some of these things. Somebody will ask, why should I consider fluctuations? Why does it matter to me? Once your project period, construction program exceeds a certain time limit, I don't want to be very specific on the time because the time actually used to be 12 months, but now I can't even say because within now and next tomorrow, a lot can change. So once your project exceeds a particular time limit that you have understanding of the trend, it is always better for you to consider including a fluctuation clause. If you're a contractor, consider including it in your costs. If you're a consultant or project administrator, consider including a fluctuation clause in your project. This means that you need to do some of these works ahead of time before you batch out the document, so that the contractor who is pricing this thing will be well informed that these are expectations of me, and he will adequately price them, and not leverage on ex gratia claim. Because if I'm administering a project and I've been able to specify some of these things, you're on your own. My interest is to protect, to be fair, both to the contractor as well as to my client. And if for any reason you did not see any of the clauses that are there, we cannot help you. One of the best things we can do is to release you from the project, and then that means we are going to be taking whatever it is that you have submitted and hold for the damages that you have caused us. So one reason that you need to consider fluctuation clauses is when your project when there is time constraint on your project and you're not able to project well what will happen in the nearest future. Secondly, when there is service problem. Like you're based in Abuja, you don't know how the dynamics of estimating and calculations in the riverine areas works. Like Oga just said now, what it takes to move materials from the mainland to the water bodies very close to the Atlantic Oceans. And then somebody brings you up to come and bid for a project there. You don't understand some of these dynamics and you just rush in. That is when you need to start considering possible fluctuations. Because between the time you're going to procure the materials and move them back to the final destinations, there are bound to be prices hike. And the client cannot cover all of this. As a contractor, you need to also cushion some of them reasonably to an extent before you can be able to pass the ball over to the client when eventually it gets out of control. And the next one is when there is project or project parties that are consigned. By this, I mean when the interest of the project is at stake. Like we want to do a project that we want to be delivered without issues. Because when you have fluctuation claims, it can actually store your project. One of the dangers of fluctuation is that when you don't resolve some of these fluctuations in time, the contractor can be dragging foot. And when he starts dragging foot, he actually has a ground for that. When he starts dragging foot, he might end up extending the project duration. And the more you waste time, the more fluctuations increase. We have similar projects like that. A project was awarded in 2010 at the cost of 13 billion. Now today, to complete the project in 2023, we are saying give us 64 billion. And somebody will look at, are you well at all? But that is because they have been dragging foot over time, that so much has changed, that for you to be able to complete that project, these are the things that you need to consider. So sometimes, for the interest of the project, or the parties that are involved, because when a contractor gets entangled in a fluctuation mess, it can actually cripple him. We know some notable contractors that have left Nigeria because of similar quote and unquote issues like this. And one of them that's not too far away, I think, is Constructioners or something like that. They just packed up overnight, one weekend like that, and just disappeared. So it's actually a landmine that every contractor or every project administrator need to be very watchful about. You don't just give room for such to happen, because if eventually it does happen, either you may end up losing some of your project fund in it, or the contractor might end up losing his integrity on that project. So when you have some of these scenarios, these are just 3 of them that I just itemized for us to discuss about. When you have some of them at stake, also consider to insert a fluctuation clause on that project. And then there is this thing about fluctuation. When you hear claims, everybody wants to jump on and start claiming. It's actually a bubble. Because there is a big margin between what you are entitled to and what you eventually get. You have to show proof. Because one of the conditions for you to receive or have a successful claim is that you must show that you have done everything reasonable in your capacity to avert that thing from happening. And when maybe the other party is clever enough and discovers some loopholes based on what the lawyers will call technicalities. You were supposed to write in before 14 days. You are supposed to send a reminder after 28 days. You are supposed to do this thing. Once you fault any of this line, you have already crossed the mark. So the person is now converting your legitimate claim to a ex gratia claim. Are we there? These are some of the technicalities that we need to be very careful about. And of course, we know when you have a fluctuation issue, we're actually looking at 3 things that could be there. That could be a time that you can actually claim for the time lost due to fluctuation. You can claim for the costs. And as well, you can claim for the profits. But oftentimes, when some people are giving you, awarding fluctuation claims for you, they don't consider the profit aspect. They just want the project not to suffer. So it's more like a middle ground between you and the success of the project. Now, for everybody, both you, be you a consultant or a contractor, that is intending or evaluating a fluctuation clause, these are some of the things that you need to be sure that are contained in that fluctuation clause. 1, your fluctuation clause needs to contain a basis for adjustment. As old as we can remember, there is this thing called basic schedule of price of materials. That is one of the bases for evaluation of fluctuations. It needs to be established. When it's missing in your contract, I don't know how they are going to be allowing you to start making claims. Because one of the fundamentals that are supposed to be there to establish a basis for fluctuation is actually missing. And then the second thing that is supposed to be there is supposed to be price indices. In a little while, we'll just get to where we can actually extract some of these price indices, because this is a workshop. We need to show how it is being done somehow. You need your price indices, whether you are going to be using foreign exchange indices, or you're going to be using your consumer price indices, or any of the indices that you also work alongside with. But it has to be established and it has to be noted. Then the second one is the period of adjustment. We mentioned it yesterday, also it was mentioned yesterday, that there has to be a kind of a limitation between what you should get. The contractor would not just be a beneficiary of every fluctuation circumstance. He has to shoulder some of it, because it is expected you are in a risky business. So being in a risky business, you should know your business very well. That was why when Sarah pointed out yesterday, risk plus risk equals to higher risk. So you being a contractor, being in a risky business, and then having fluctuations all around you, it simply means that you have a higher risk and you have to find a way to be able to cushion some of those higher risks. So it's important that we understand some of this. Then, of course, we'll talk about notices and documentation. Yes, there is a price fluctuation. Diesel moved from this price to this price, and you were able to document it, as well as communicate it across to the project administrators. These are some of the technicalities that they can actually use to convert that your legitimate claim to ex gratia claim. So instead of giving you all that is duly yours, they can now be giving you whatever bit they think they can give you out of their own magnanimity. So let us know some of these things. When you are administering a project and a contractor does not comply with all of these conditions, always know that he's already missing out on what he's supposed to do. And if you so love him, you can always advise him to get a professional, a quantity surveyor, to also guide him on how to do that also. Then the calculation methods. There are basic flows or calculation method that you can actually use. I was in a meeting one day with my managing director. There was something that we were working on a project, and there were issues that we are envisaging. So he was trying to marry 2 calculation models to be able to claim fluctuations. I had to open his eyes that very day. I said, sir, What you're claiming for is based on this condition of contract. What you're now bringing to marry it is also based on this condition of contract. And there is no combination of two of these things in the contract that we are working on. I am only telling you this because when it gets to maybe any of my colleagues out there and they will say that this man was there and did not spot this thing. So they will be looking at us like we don't know what we are doing. The right thing to do is that it has to be established. A model for calculation of your fluctuations has to be established when you have a fluctuation clause. So also know that and have it in your mind whenever somebody tells you this is a fluctuation clause. And of course, we mentioned that there are limitations that you have to know. It might be that the contractor is expected to shoulder the fluctuation up to some certain limits before he can be able to push the bulk over to the client. So let us also look at some of this now. Now, some pointers that we know we have 3 different contracts. I tried to bring out these conditions of contract because as of today, they are one of the latest that we have, the latest versions that we have. For the JCT, it's still the 2017 version that we have. It has a fluctuation clause inside it. Then the JCT 2016 version. And, you know, the UK, they have been enjoying stable economy for quite a long time. And they tried to tinker away with fluctuation clauses to remove it. But after 2016, they had need to bring it back. And as we are talking about now, they are now considering to bring fluctuation as an important clause in the conditions of contract because of the experience that they have been having post-COVID. So, but for us here, we have never had such kind of problem because we have always kept our ball ahead of us here. We're always seeing fluctuations and we know that it exists actually there. Then, of course, the BPP standard bidding document. It is our own bidding document for every public procurement work that you're doing. Every project that is being paid for by public funds. There is there is a thing that is supposed to make it mandatory that every public fund will be based on BPP. And this also contains some conditions of contract, which we also need to get ourselves acquainted to. So some pointers that I've just closed that are very important and relevant whenever you're talking about claims and fluctuations are some of the ones that I've just highlighted out here. Now, when we are talking about fluctuations, there are actually 3 different things that we are looking at. Either we are looking at price escalation, or we are talking about price adjustment, or we are talking about price fluctuations. They can actually look like they are the same thing, but they are not really the same. When we are looking at price escalation, we are talking about the escalation in the prices of each component, individual components of or materials. That is when we are talking about price escalation. When they give you or submit your basic price of materials, what they will be looking at is the escalation between the price of cement, escalation between the price of reinforcement and the rest of them. So based on whatever it is that is covered in the conditions that you're working with, if it is escalation that is being adopted, you now know how it will be calculated. But if it is price adjustment that is being adopted, you now know that you're talking about generating a model or a formula, a factor that will be using now to extrapolate against the prices of the contract sum. And of course, when you're talking about price fluctuations, you're not looking at only the fluctuation that has taken place within the cost of each element that you have on their project. So whether you are talking about adjustment, escalation, or fluctuation, you're actually talking about one thing, which is the final destination, the fluctuation clause. Fluctuation claim, rather. Okay. Some of the approach that you can use to prepare your fluctuation claim. I just highlighted some of them. One, you need to review the contract and be conversant with the contract. Know what you are qualified for. Know what you want to claim for. Know the ground to claim for it. And then the next thing is to identify the items to be claimed. Establish the base period for your claim. If your contract, because we have had a similar experience, we did a project, we are involved in a contract that has been going on successfully for quite some while, and then all of a sudden, there is need for us to consider fluctuation on some of the basic materials. And we discovered that an important material like stone base was not covered in that basic price of materials. We are now left at the mercy of the administrators. But good thing they were able to understand very well, that it was not an omission on our own side. It was an omission based on the people that drafted the document, and we did not want to alter their document. But I advise you also on this place today, when you're working on any project that you're giving basic price of material that does not contain some of your key elements of that project, please, on your own, insert such, because that can actually save your project from challenges. So we have an outline of some of the things that you need to do. You need to calculate the price index, compute the claims, prepare your claims and document it, submit it across. And whenever you have done all this, always be ready for negotiations, because most often times it's not what you ask for that they will give you. They will always call you to negotiate it out, because they always have to do some of their work, they do their responsibilities. So you might be asking for 10, but always putting in mind that you may not eventually get 10. If you get it, fine, but if you don't get it, always know that it's well negotiated for. The price adjustments. For us to do this thing, at this stage, I want to go over to this is a typical example. I mentioned to us that as a contractor that is beginning his project, you are expected to shoulder some of the risk. Maybe the contract clause says that we cannot accept any fluctuation until it is above 10%. Some of these things, you don't build it directly into the cost of your item. No. You isolate the cost of the work itself and build it in as what we call indirect cost. Okay? Because when we look at this escalation formula that we have here, there is something called adjustable components and non-adjustable components of the project. Now, the adjustable components of the project are some of the things that have direct bearing on the project itself. Talking about labor, talking about material, talking about equipment. But the ones that are not adjustable are the ones that you talk about are some of things like your overhead, more or less your indirect costs. Nobody is going to be paying you profit for all those things. Okay? So that is why we look at them, we categorize them as adjustable and non-adjustable. And here I have a list of some of those non-adjustables, which is my indirect cost. Before now, I've been talking about people using markup as against using percentages to escalate for profit and all these things. Because when you have a setup like what we have here, you can be able to cushion in some of these indirect costs that you have. Establish them as a percentage. For example, from experience and from looking at the indices, we know there is probability of price escalation during the period of this contract. One of the things that we can actually do is to project how much or how far would that price escalation be, and how much can it affect our project. Now, from analysis, now we have discovered that our price variation risk that we are going to be considering on this project is about 5%. That 5%, you go ahead to include the 5% here as a percentage. There are mechanics that you can actually use to establish this thing accurately. Likewise, also from experience, you establish your management fee, you establish your overhead, you establish your project cost risk, and every other thing incidental to the cost of the project. A good number of them may not be in the rates of each of those items, but you add them as an add-on on top of your rates. That is what I've gone ahead to establish here. Now, what this means is that for me as a contractor, I am expected to have an additional cost of 668 million naira arising as a result of my indirect cost. This has nothing to do with the actual cost of the project, because the main actual cost of the project to me as a contractor would only be the actual cost of the work plus contractors' preliminaries. Okay? The actual cost of the work plus contractors' preliminary. Now, for you to know the actual cost of the work, you need to get to your BOQ. When you have given your estimate of the cost, he will now price all the items minus profit and any other incidental cost. Let him remove it outside. On one side, he will price all the cost of the item, the basic cost of the item to the organization. He will price all of them. And when he has priced them finish, he will only escalate that one during your pricing. Hello? Sorry, at this point I want to slow down. I want to establish something. There is difference between pricing and costing. Is he understood?
You want somebody to tell us what the difference is? Pricing and costing. I can possibly pick any person to pricing and costing. Okay, who are those in the contracting section? You know, my colleagues in the consulting may not understand these issues. Can I just, maybe by show of hands, can I see those who are in contracting? Contracting, they are afraid that, okay.
Okay. Pricing. I feel when you get to do market survey and get the prices of items, basic items you need for the preparation of your rate. So while costing is entails the whole labor, material, and every other thing that is needed to have a rate.
You said every other thing. I saw you put in other interests. I wanted to ask question on that, but then, okay.
I can say that pricing entails both the cost of the materials and logistics attached to it. But costing goes beyond just material and logistics. It captures both fluctuation and possible increment in the as time may go on. It captures it gives a shock observer to itself. Costing.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Just to save time.
Yes, you
Just to save
can
time.
continue.
To save time. The major difference between pricing and costing. Costing is the work of the estimator. Pricing is a management decision. Did you get that part? Costing is the work of the estimator. You, the quantity surveyor, your own is to go ahead. How many material, how many labor, how many this. That is your work. That is costing. Pricing means that the management need to take decision. How much profit needs to be taken on the job? What are the risks that will be considered on the job? These things that are incidental to the cost of the project are what you consider under your pricing. That is why when a contractor submits bid, we don't call it the contractor's cost. When you say contractor's cost, you're referring only to the cost of the work to the contractor. But when you say price, you're considering your profit, overhead, all those things that are incidental to executing the job are part of your price. Is that well noted? So that even if you don't take away anything, please hold this one very well, pocket it and run with it. All right. So in pricing, when you're doing your pricing, after you have established the actual cost of the project, and like this dummy bill that I have here, I'm sure it will be made available to us. The cost of this project is 2.017. That's the cost of the project. To me, the contractor, that is the cost of the project to me. But by the time I start considering my profit and every other thing, the cost of the project will become about 2.4B. And how I was able to get that escalation factor was when I come down to this place, which I call my markup. That figure that I gave contractor. And the next thing I need to do is I now include my contractor's my contractor's preliminaries. I know very well, sometimes the client might provide you with some preliminaries. Now, if for any reason the client provides you with any preliminary which is already here, remove it from here because it has been priced as an item. But if there are no such provisions, you are expected to do the work whether there is NEPA or not. You are expected to do the work whether there is access road or not. Whether there is water on site, electricity and other stuff. So as a contractor who is moving back to site or coming to site, you need to provide all these things. And there is no particular way or item that you can charge these things to. The only best place for you to establish them is under your contractor's preliminary. Don't worry, you're not going to show it to anybody. It is part of your secret. You only have to add it here, and then it will give you an established cost of the project, which is about 2.4B. But this is not the final cost. Because you now need, for you to get the final cost, you need to establish and add your indirect cost. Now, the indirect cost is what we are talking about how to establish. When you get your indirect cost using any of these formulas, sorry, for the purpose of what we are discussing, we'll just skip through this part, this formula. But when you use any of these formula, you can be able to escalate that factor to be able to come to what's supposed to cost 1 naira is going to cost 1 naira 20 kobo. That is where you have this markup for pricing. Is that okay? So that cost that you have established now, which is supposed to be 1 naira, by the time you now price it properly, it will no more be 1 naira, it will now be 1 naira 20 kobo. The additional 20 kobo on top is to make up for all these incidental costs which you have included under your considerations here. Now, I am a contractor and I want to bid for a job which is supposed to last for 24 months. And I have been made to know there is no fluctuation clause. Hello? This is a tricky one now. There is no fluctuation clause. What should I do? I have to remain. In fact, if there is anything to go by, turnkey projects prosper more, like we are living in now, because early need is 100 billion naira. And when you give it to them for 100 billion naira, they will still deliver it even after 24 months. Because they have taken their risk, they have done their calculations, and they are willing to stand by their quotes. So, how do you do that? One of the places that you can actually get information that you can use to do that is by going to any of the statutory organizations that have been empowered by law to publish indices for Nigeria. And one of such places is the NBS, National Bureau of Statistics. They give us the information that we need to use and talk about fluctuations, talk about consumer price index and the rest of them. If you don't know these destinations, it is important that you note it today, so that whenever you want to make projections as to possible these things, always come down here. They have access to a lot of libraries, record of events that have been happening over time. When you get the information, whether you're dealing with information for consumer price index, or you want to talk about foreign exchange, you come back to the CBM portal. Under the CBM portal, you should come down to where you have statistics. Then under statistics, there is one place that it says rates. Monthly average of exchange rates. Now, this is where it will now give you all the exchange rate that you have. And you can always download so that you can have inside backlog up to around 1995 or thereabouts. But there is a problem. While the last speaker was presenting he said something. When you're leveraging so much on historical data, you need to be careful. It is important that you take only down to 2023. The information was crafted from the NBS website that I just showed you. Now, if I am to put this information in a graph, let me quickly do that now. Hello? Can we see what is here on the floor? Now, I have quickly put this information on a graph. But when you look at this information, you discover something about this information. The projections of the information is leveraging on areas that are not important. Historical data that are far beyond usefulness to me. Because when you're talking about projections, it's leveraging on every input that you have and using them to extrapolate against the future. So me going to crop information from 1995 is skewing my trend. It is affecting it wrongly. The best form for me to actually use for now is to go back to the recent past, the most recent past. That is the what will now show the actual trend. When you pick information from the most recent past, chances are that your projection will be very correct. Is that correct? Your projection will be very correct. So we know that information database is very important, but when you are going to harness from your database, always take the ones that are relevant, the most recent information, so that you don't end up distorting your projections. So when I do this kind of thing, and it gives me this information, me as a quantity surveyor, I now have to fall back on my statistics to be able to make projections. And if for any reason you run away from statistics class, then I'm sorry, we have caught you again. We know very well how to make projections based on CPI. But what is more difficult is how to make projections into the future, because the CPI is giving you only history. Do you get that part? CPI gives you only history, but to make projections into the future, you need to convert that CPI into inflation rate and use the inflation rate to project into the future. Hoping that, like economists will say, ceteris paribus, every other thing holds equal. So to make that projections, I have here a typical scenario. One, we have a project that we want to leverage information on from 2019. Because I said you have to take it from the most recent past. I cannot say because I want to take the most recent past, I go and take data from this year to project into the future. It's not actually enough. It's insufficient data. So you need to go back a little while to be able to project, so that you will have the model will have something to pick trend from and be able to project into the future. So I have my base year. I'm basing my base year now to be 2019. And then my current year is 2023. So I go over to my MBS, pick up my data from MBS, and then for 2019, my record is about 269.1. That is the CPI for that year. Likewise also, the CPI for 2023 is about 445.79. Now, once I've gotten these two informations together, I can now start making my projections. And one of the such things that you need to establish is what is the time difference between the base year and the current year? You establish it, which is in this case 4 years. 2023 minus 2019 gives me 4 years. And then for my cost index ratio, to establish my cost index ratio, I will be dividing the current index divided by the base index. Is that okay? Once you do that, it will give you a number which is 1.66. And if for any reason there is a decline in the index, it will give you a number 0. something, something, something. But whenever you have an increase, you will always have something 1 something going up. So now we'll get that one. But for you to make projections into the future, I told us, there is a formula that you need to leverage on. It's a standard formula. The formula means that if you want to project any time, you use a compounding formula to be able to make your projection. So in this case now, our formula for projection is 1 plus inflation rate, open and close brackets, raised to the number of years that you want to project. It simply means that you're going to be adding the inflation rates to what you have and project it into the future. But the trick, like we know, is always getting the average inflation rate. How do you harness the average inflation rate? Because it is not established anywhere. Even in the data that we have here, I've been able to establish what the inflation rate is on these columns. But yet, it still does not give us the average. And you literally going to go and take all of them and sum them and divide them by a total number. Still does not give you an accurate average. For you to make an average, you need to make some discounting. So to go further on that one, we need to calculate what is our inflation rate. And the basis for calculating your inflation rate is the current inflation, the current CPI minus your base CPI divided by your base CPI. That will give you the inflation rate. Hello? What I'm showing here, I am not working with percentages. When I multiply by 100, it converts it back to percentage for me. For now, I am still working with points. Okay? So I will do that same thing, and it will give me 0.66. And 0.66 is an equivalent of what? 65%. That is how I was able to get this 65% here. And for the people that will now, from this point now, say they want to project, let them quickly go and start using it. Since you have an average inflation rate of 0.66, divided by the number of years that you want to project, and say you want to use 0.76 to make your projections, this is actually wrong also. Because we need to discount this inflation rate over the period of time that we have taken it. And to do that discounting, that is where you now talk about the average inflation rates. And the formula to do average inflation rate is this one, which I've established here. The formula is your CPI, current CPI, divided by the base CPI, raised to power 1 over the number of years, minus 1. When you do this, it will now discount that inflation rate which you had to 0.13. Now, using that 0.13 inflation rate, you can now come and plug it into this formula which you have now, which is 1 plus 0.13 raised to power number of years that you want to project into the future. Based on, remember, ceteris paribus, all things being equal. That is, if we don't have anybody that will come and take up the microphone and tell you, subsidy gone. But if we have such, we'll always have turbulence.
Let's move on. You know, this is a topic for another workshop. You know, we still want to do more workshops. So go on, please. Yes, we have like 15 minutes to close. I'm not sure if we'll share the Excel with them. Maybe we'll call them for another workshop. Anyways, on a lighter note, let them pay attention, and we will give them as much as we can. Go ahead.
Okay. So when you do that and plug it into your formula, it should be able to give you a factor. And that factor, like in this case now, is a factor of 1.88. Now, with this factor, you are projecting into the future, just like we have here, 5 years ahead of time. Because you have taken into consideration the inflation trend based on 2019 to 2023, and now you are projecting into up to 2029 or thereabout. This is how you can be able to do this. And another thing that I felt is also very important for us to talk about is price hedging. During the first speaker, he was able to introduce this concept that there is actually a scenario whereby you want to be safe, and you want to save some of the cost of your project in a foreign currency which does not fluctuate, so that you can always use it at every point in time to hedge against possible inflations. I am actually working on a project that we have this guy we just talked about in the other place is the same we're going to be using. But in this case, when you are talking about you going to use price hedging, you will not be leveraging on information from the MBS. You will now shift over to information from the Central Bank of Nigeria, which gives you data on foreign exchange. So that is why I've also gone ahead of time to crop out some information from Central Bank of Nigeria for a dollar, euro, and pounds. But this demonstration that we're having here is only based on the dollar. So in 2020, the dollar was around, the official rate was around 381. And 2023, the official rate is about 770. Now, the same way that we did it before, you calculate the foreign exchange index ratio, which will give you about 2.02% increase. When you go further again to discount it, you get the inflation rate that has taken place on the foreign exchange, which is about 1.02. Now, you still go further to check it, and it will give you the average inflation rate. So it's not from my side.
Pinhan from the... I think you're talking about hedging, and we need to have that sheet.
That will come on your project. Now, once you have established that, now it comes down to be that the possible fluctuation trend that will happen on our project for a period of 3 years is about 1.598. We keep it down. Now, the next thing we need to do is that the cost of the project that we have established, we get it down. Then we work out what is the inflation that will take place within the course of this 36 months that this project will be on stream, which is cost of the project multiplied by the inflation factor that we will experience. It will give us a new figure, which is 4.1. All right? Once we have gotten 4.1, the next thing is for us to go and work out what is the difference between the original contract sum that we're going to be presenting and the inflated contract sum. It will give us a figure which is about 1.5. Then that 1.5 will divide it by the value of the exchange rates, current exchange rate as at today. Then it will give you a figure, in this case about 2.something million USD. That 2.something million USD, when you remove it away from your projected total contract sum, it will give you an amount that you're supposed to hedge. That is an equivalent amount that you need to put in a foreign currency to be able to hedge against possible price inflations in the future. But this calculation is a little bit tricky. You need to be very careful. You need to make sure that your indices are quite right. You need to make sure that your projection time is as reasonable as possible. Because when you miss any of these factors, it can actually, instead of being a helpful hand, it can actually be a landmine for you. Has not done. And one of the most difficult things for us to calculate, especially in today's Nigeria, is diesel consumption on a project. We have the problem of allowing contractors to submit what exactly he calls his diesel consumption. But you, a contract administrator, you can actually checkmate these things by establishing what is supposed to be the diesel component of this project, not the diesel component of the contractor's overhead. By that I mean, a contractor is working on your project, he's driving his cars up and down the site, but the diesel consumption that he's consuming finds its way into your payroll. It's actually a bad practice because we don't put those checkmates ahead of time. But when you put the checkmate ahead of time as a contract administrator, you're supposed to establish what exactly is the diesel component on this project. And I was able to bring in some typical example of such. Now, to make simple calculations for that, the methodology may differ from organizations to organizations. But one thing that is understandable, that is unique, is uniform in all of them, is that the principles are the same. The whole thing you're going to be doing is you're prorating what is the consumption of the equipment that will be working, particular equipment that will be working on that project. And you're trying to reflect them over the total volume of project or quantity in that project that is provided. So if, for example, here I have my equipment for work that is based on clearing of sites, and I have itemized that I'm going to be using my truck, I'll be using my payloader, I'll be using my bulldozers for the project. And I know from my schedule of plants that I have that my truck will consume about 14 liters per hour. And my payloader will consume about 20 liters per hour. You don't have to break your head to go get some of these information. Your plant manager should provide you with the consumption rate of the equipment. Or the equipment catalog can actually give you some of these those rates. So once you have them already out here, all you need is just multiply the number of those equipment that you'll be engaging for that activity by the consumption rate, assuming that all of them are working at the same time. It will give you a number which is about 295, 140, and 140. Total all of this diesel together, it will give you total diesel that the equipment will consume for working on the project in an hour. Now you now convert, sorry, not an hour, for a unit. You now convert the total volume of the output of those equipment per hour or per unit. In this case now, the equipment will be working like about 300 cubic meter in an hour. So you now get that 300 cubic meter equivalent that you're going to be producing and use it to multiply, divide the total diesel that will be consumed by all of the equipment by the production output of the equipment. That will give you a factor, in this case, about 1.9 liters per cubic meter. Once you have established this fact, all you need to now go back to the total volume of quantity that is available on the project. In this case, we have about 7,592. Multiply it by that 1.9 something liters, and it will be giving you about 14,526. This also is what you need to do when you are talking about preparing your claims. But when you're doing your claims, you're only going to be bringing in the quantity that has been executed, because that is what you'll be claiming for. And then you prepare it the same way that we have just shown you. Similarly, also, you do it for almost all the items that you have on your bill. It might look cumbersome, but then if you actually arrange your costing process, it shouldn't look as disturbing as it is at the moment, because this is actually the same process that you are supposed to adopt when you're preparing your cost. Kudos to the people, organizations that are presently using estimating packages to do this. It makes it far more easier for them. All they need is just call up a particular module in that thing and be able to extract all these information in one swift. But if you have to leverage on the powers of Excel to be able to do it, I'm sorry, you just have to do it, calculate it manually like this. So when you have done this, you will come down to the total volume of, total quantity of diesel that will be consumed for each and every of these items of work that you have. Then aggregate all of them, that will be the total diesel that will be consumed on the project. So assuming that this is for only works that has been done by the contractor, it simply means that about 94,610 liters of diesel has been consumed for the contractor to execute these quantities of work that we have established here. So whenever the contractor is now going to present his claim, what he's expected to be claiming for is only fluctuation that has existed in the basic prices of diesel between, let me open that one up. Okay. It is now expected that the contractor will be presenting only those prices that is this. Now, when you come under this share where I have diesel, contractor is claiming that for the quantity of work that he has done, about 50-something thousand liters of diesel was consumed. And then, mind you, what we are talking about is fluctuation. We're not paying him all the amount of money for diesel. So we're only going to be paying him a fraction of what has changed from the base price of diesel and the current price of diesel. That is why you need to establish the quantity that you'll be using for your equation, as well as establish the base price, the current price, the differences, and then you now talk about the differences multiplied by the quantity of diesel that is consumed. Similarly also, you need to do the same thing for all the materials that are involved on your projects. In this case, I was able to extract some few materials. Some materials for, let's say, in situ concrete. But you need to leverage on some of the basic factors that you use in doing your estimating. For example, concrete C8/10, I estimated that I will be using about 150 kg of cement per cubic meter. Now, I have to use it now and start extrapolating it against the quantity of concrete that is established for it to be able to give me the volume of cement or the tonnage of cement that will be required to execute that project. Now, the calculation has been done, and at the end, I will be able to establish the actual quantity of cement that is involved on my project, quantity of sand, the actual quantity of aggregates, and all the rest of them. You'll be able to establish all of them here. But where the beautiful thing about all of these things happens is, if for any reason you're working on any of the projects that has this price adjustment factor, and you don't have these things already at hand, it becomes a little bit difficult for you. But if you have them already, you need to just come and look at. When you're doing your price adjustment factor, this is more or less the table that will be given to you. You are at liberty to establish the cost element, the major cost items that are driving the project. And you may not be able to identify them except you go back and do some of those analyses that we have done. Check against diesel, check the cost of cement, check sand, check all of those things. When you do all of those things, you will now be able to come down and start extrapolating them. Remember, when we are doing this, introducing the overhead, we said there are some items that are non-adjustable items. Those are the things that pertains to you as a contractor. And the client will not be furnishing them, paying you profit on all those things, or paying you inflationary costs for all those items. So that one has to be established out as non-adjustable factor. Now sometimes some of the drafters of our contracts will always establish a threshold that that amount is not supposed to be. Sometimes it might range between 0.1 to about 0.3 or thereabouts. And in this case, we are looking at something similar to that, 0.3. So whatever it is that they have already provided for you in the contract that you're working with is what should guide you. Then you now go further and now start establishing. Based on our analysis, what should be guiding us is that cement will consume about 577.92 ton. That is what is required. And the basic price of cement is about 40,000 per ton. When we establish all of them, it will give us a factor. When we relate this factor against the actual cost of concrete works, it will be giving us a percentage which we'll now use and establish on this part. When you do all these things and come down, this is how you can be able to go ahead and project it. But for fluctuations, when they are going to be doing the calculations on the fluctuations, they will now be using the base prices of all these items that I've established and use it against your calculation. When the whole essence is to give you a multiplier or a factor that you will be using to extrapolate against all the contractors' valuations. And in this case, it is giving us about 2.19%. 2.19. That simply means that if the contractor's value of work done is about 500, what he's supposed to be entitled to will be about 500 times 2.9. Okay? Maybe to save time, since the conversation is ongoing, we'll continue to talk about it. We started talking about this since last year. Hopefully the incoming administration will still project this discourse until we get better on how to manage some of these challenging times that we're living in. So thank you.
Thank you very much, QSCJ Michael. Thank you very much. Please, can we do much better? Can we appreciate him more? I mean, what the resource persons had been giving us are actually things that you just don't read books and you get them. Of course, sometimes when we mention their experiences, we do that for a purpose. I'm sure you will agree with me. It's actually a paper well put together, and it's an experience well shared. So can we still appreciate him, please? And I will want to confidently tell you that these are areas that the National Executive Council is very keen on, and we will continue to organize trainings on this particular area. Can we suspend all these greetings? I think you will have more time to interact with him. And if you don't do that, we will also surcharge. You will want us to maybe change our minds. We will just convey an emergency National Executive Council meeting, and we will raise the cost of the workshop and withhold your certificates, possibly. But then, as I said, it's an area we are looking at to train our members the more. It is often said that the era we live in is actually the era of data. They say data is the new oil. And then if we have our members understand data very well and how to analyze, maybe not manipulate data, maybe we will actually be better off in the industry. And as at yesterday, a colleague of ours who is coming from the economics background mentioned the fact that the amount of data we have is actually the leverage we have in the industry. But unfortunately, we haven't used that to our own advantage. So I think it's time we wake up to that responsibility, see how best we can use the data we have to help the country and even our employers with more insight and then better decision making. So thank you very much, Mr. CJ Michael. And I think we didn't inform members that we have an ongoing training on digital literacy, and it's part of actually what the training is addressing. So it is not too late. You can join the training that is ongoing on, and I'm sure by January next year, we will start more robust training on this issue. So if you are interested, the Secretariat will provide links. We will want to have members express interest in advance so that the resource persons will also be motivated to research more and prepare more for the program. So thank you once again, distinguished participants. Very quickly, we will move to the last paper of this technical session. And that paper will also, or the presentation will also be led by one of our senior members in the profession. He has also more than 25 years industry experience. And not only that, he's actually a global player of repute because he has worked on a lot of projects in the country. Talk about the airport projects, the remodeling of the airports. His firm is involved. The expansion or the completion of the Federal Inland Revenue Services in Abuja, his firm is involved. And then, of course, talk about courses in the Ivy League universities in the world. He has been there. So please join me and welcome QS Aminu Abubakar Suleiman, who is going to be talking to us on this topic, but from the consultant perspective. Thankfully, we have listened to a lot of contractors. We will want to know how the consultants are also managing these turbulent times, or how they are assisting the industry and the contractors to manage the turbulent times. He has 45 minutes to run through the presentation.
I could see Mr. Chairman very far away, but I still recognize him. Gentlemen and ladies, permit me to stand on existing protocol. Mine, I don't think, is a big task. What they're asking me for, it's a kind of story from what you've been listening to. It has been a contractor. I'm happy the last presenter mentioned the private sector and the client, or the administrator, that's the word he used, for administrators. For me, I think I'm going to talk about my experience, having worked, like Mala Ahmed said, 25 years within the private sector. The team is the same thing, managing projects within the trying times that we are in. And I'm happy, one of the presenters also mentioned that, is it now that we are facing the trying times, or we've always been facing so? I think the time has always been challenging, depending on what time did you come to be. So, let me ask these questions. How many of us here think it is tough to be a successful quantity surveyor in Nigeria? I hope you know the JAPA stuff that is happening in the medical sector. That is also happening in quantity surveying or built environment. Do you think it's tough in Nigeria to be a quantity surveyor? Nobody thinks it's tough? I'm happy. Huh? Is it tough, yeah? Okay, we will see as we progress. How many of us think there are more opportunities to be a successful quantity surveyor in Nigeria than anywhere in the world? Yeah? Thank you very much. So I have reduced this because I have 40 minutes. the outline of this presentation will look at the global picture of infrastructure or built environment. Then I'm going to look at cascaded down to Nigeria. Then I'll look at the challenges from the private sector or from the client side, who we represent. Then I'll give you a success story, according to my opinion, what I believe will make a better consultant. Then we'll look at the final thoughts. The 25 years started for me, for our seniors who are here, if you remember the PTF era. The PTF era was an opportunity for private sectors to actually showcase their talents. There were a number of projects for people. And at that time, a number of professionals, they became independent and they keyed in, be it an architect, a quantity surveyor, or an engineer. And that has shaped a number of professionals. Some people have actually told that route to remain independent. Some have, dwelt into public sector and the likes within the built environment. The industry has grown, whether we like it or not. Before, it was not like this. Workshops were being carried out in Lagos and perhaps in the north in Kaduna. Those were the areas where you find some good quantity surveyors. For those of us in the north, you remember the likes of Shehu Giwa, Erufai and Partners, Proman, etc., who have also offices within the western part of Nigeria. But today, we have it in Abuja, even in the north itself. When you go to most of the states, they have branches, and they have good numbers of quantity surveyors that are members from that state. So this is also a good thing. We have grown from where we used to be. Today, everybody feels quantity surveying. I'm happy you had the representative of the governor who said in Edo alone, the number of quantity surveyors they intend to employ and how they intend to do that. That's actually a plus and kudos for quantity surveying. On the global picture, like I said, urbanization, population growth, resilience, PPP, regulations, finance, all these things, they come to bear when you look at the global picture of built environment. And if you cascade it down, in every of this sector, it requires the services of a quantity surveyor, whether you are the public sector or you are the private sector. For me, the private sector, just like the banks, you know what the banks do? They look at, the JP Morgan, the global, what do you call it, the Goldman Sachs. They look at what is happening around the world and they see where they fit in, where the banks fit in, whether you are a commercial bank, whether you are an investment banker. So it's the same thing the quantity surveyors are doing from the private side. So we look at the global picture, whether we like it or not. It actually comes to Nigeria and it will come to you. So like I said, on the urbanization and population, the growth of people that move to the urban area necessitated the need for more infrastructure. And these infrastructures cannot be achieved without the quantity surveyor. We all know that. Sustainability and resilience, that's also a new thing. Before now, we know how things are being done, but nobody wants to leave what they call the value for money. You want it to be more sustainable, something that you don't go back like they used to have that notion in public sector. After a few years, you have to go back to do renovation or you do rehabilitation. Then we have I'm happy somebody mentioned the importance of data. Before now, data is not something we do really look at, but globally, the truth about it is data is very important and it affects the construction industry. I'll give you an example of data. It's that in the US, the inflation rate, just like the last speaker has said, I think it's it has just moved between 3 to 5% for 10 years. So totaling 8%. In the UK, it's still less than 10%. And this is how the trend has even reduced in the UK. But in Nigeria, I'm sorry, we know where it is. It's actually skyrocketing. It's in the 20s. Now, these are actually factors of data that helps even the investors within this confined region to actually achieve in terms of infrastructural desires and need. Financing is a challenge. That's the biggest challenge we all have. It's global financing, because of the lack of the financing from the government. Sometimes they collaborate to form the private sector collaboration, which is the PPP, to acquire assets. So that is there, and it's also a very big opportunity for quantity surveyors. For those of us who have been either on the TA service, meaning transaction advisory, or from the public side, wherever you find yourself, that's actually an opportunity. They said, welcome to Nigeria, a land of opportunity. We all know that. In Nigeria, there are a number of opportunities that, especially when it comes to infrastructure. The gap between Nigeria and the globe, it's actually very conspicuous. I don't think we have attained 10% of our infrastructural gap. Any sector you take, any sector, you find out that that gap is there. And for every government that comes to address this, it's actually an opportunity for people in our industry, be it in the private sector or public sector. So for us in the private sector, like I mentioned earlier, we are like bankers. You look at what is the manifesto or what are the agendas of every government, and you see where they really intend to focus on. Are they going to adhere to? We see that the National Infrastructure Master Plan, or there are new plans that they come with. So I have looked at, even in Nigeria, like we have the global factors, the population growth, the infrastructure deficit, the government investment, which today's government, I think it was last government that brought about the Infracom. I don't know if anybody knows about Infracom. Infracom, yes, Akinwumi will surely know that. Infracom, it's an agency set up by federal government through the Central Bank of Nigeria to address some of the infrastructural gaps. Then we have private sector participation, like I said. You remember the year 1999 to 2003, when democracy came to Nigeria, we had public assets that were not properly managed. At that time, privatization came in, and those assets were now transferred to public assets were transferred to private sectors. After then, we still need more of those assets. And I think sometimes 29 or 10, the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission came in to be, and that is to regulate the participation or the collaboration between the public sector and the private sector to acquire infrastructural assets. A number of them, depending on the phases. In PPP time, it could be a green field, it could be a brown field, it could be a yellow field. So depending on whatever you find yourself, all these are opportunities for quantity surveyors in various arms of the government, whether in the private sector or in public sector. But I see more of that in private sector because, like I mentioned earlier, the gaps are too much in terms of infrastructure development. And you see, we will get it right. We have not actually gotten it because it's been moving in a very slow pace, trying to collaborate between the public sector and the private sector because of factors I will also explain here, which comes from government in terms of regulation. Technology, government investment, which I mentioned, in everywhere for government to actually address the gap. There is need for the government to create a kind of either a subsidy or a support. I'm sure for those who have gone very far, you see like in China, there is that bank of infrastructure or there is bank of construction, even in some African countries where they support the private sector within that industry. In Nigeria, I think it's called Bank of Industry. I don't know if there's any other bank, but even the Bank of Industry, it's not really deep into construction. So that's some of the investment the government make. So some of the challenges, like I mentioned, I'm going to talk about clearly within this private sector that we are. There is the government. There is a government sector, government challenge into within the trying times of infrastructure or construction projects. The government, in terms of, we have the policies, the regulation. I think the speaker I met this morning, who came from River State, talked about the public procurement. Now, the public procurement, we all know that it's not only within a state government, but it's also at national government. At national government, it is to check the expenses or the transactions, or like they said, procurement is a trade. The trading between how government is being expending, its resources. Some of these regulations, you'll agree with me that when you do business with government, you see they impede the smooth sale of projects. And so many examples here. The fluctuation guy just gave us the index. This index that he gave us, I'm sure those in public sector, it will be difficult for us to accept it, or private sector. We rely so much on those basic prices. If you don't put that in the contract, it's actually going to be difficult. This long arithmetic or calculation is actually difficult. But if that's the policy that we just have to take it. A number of policies that the government brings into being, which is actually challenges, like they talked about the lowest responsive bidder. This lowest responsive bidder, in many cases, it does not give value. So those are actually affecting even in the private sector. The industry dynamic, let me go back to some of the government challenges are insecurity and instability. For us that practice within the northern part of Nigeria, which I know even those that practice within the south of Nigeria, security is very important. Security in the north, if you practice within the northwest, today you know what is happening. Now, how this security helps in your project documentation, you need to understand. One of the key characteristics in construction project is dispute. And this dispute will come when you don't plan or when you do not have this documentation properly done. Because if I'm doing a project in Sokoto and probably at the time of planning or doing this document, the contractor, I don't know who the contractor is, and my client is the government. So during tender, the contractor who is likely to win this job comes from, let's say, even Abuja, it's even closer. I tell you, he's going to have a number of factors that he's going to build because of the insecurity. I know of a big contractor who has an opportunity to work in the Northeast, but he declined it because of the insecurity. These are actually big challenges. So, and these challenges are not challenges that insurance can cover. You know that. It's not every insurance that takes terrorism. So it's very important, if you are in the private sector, you should understand these kind of challenges, which they say government provides security and safety of everybody. But I don't think it's also like that. We really need to think deeper. High cost of doing businesses. The high cost of doing businesses here, what I mean here is that there are a number of tax officers that come to your office if you are a private, how do I call it, a consultant. For those of us who have offices, you pay business permit. Tomorrow another group will come and ask you, come and pay for this tax and that tax. Every tax that you know, some you don't even know they exist, but they'll come and ask you. So you have to prepare. And how do you get them? Your only means of getting them is when you have job. So those are actually challenges that impaired some of our progress. The industry-related is plants and equipment, lack of reliable data, as I mentioned earlier, inadequate standards. So I'll talk about the two, or human resources. I'll talk about the plant and equipment. Plant and equipment, depending on the project that you're embarking on, it's very important. Some of those projects, the architect will wake up and design a skyscraper, and he wants us to cost it. If you have never done, or you don't understand the plant that works in that field, that will cause confusion during execution. So it's very, very important we understand that. That's actually a challenge. And a number of us, because like I said, we have gap in this infrastructure. We want to see what is in America or in Malaysia or in England. We want to replicate that here. It's very important we understand the construction technology that will help us to build this proposal or this desire of the client. Inadequate and standards. There are a number of unprofessional or unethical doings. I'm happy, I just said that a number of us here are going to be inducted today. When you go out to practice, be it public or private sector, it's very important we adhere to ethical standards. Ethical standard, we should be honest, we should do things with transparency, we should also understand what we are doing. It's very, very important. It helps the quantity surveying practice. When you do something and the architect or the builder, or like the madam who was here who says she's an estate surveyor, she challenges you. There is a way it gives the impression you create before your client. So it's very, very important when they mention your name. When I said Mr. Ahmed, so, oh no, that's a professional. He will tell you, you don't need to know everything. To be honest with you, you don't need to know everything. Because as you grow, you see that there are a number of branches that you really need to develop your skills. But where you don't know, you don't need to bother yourself. The fluctuation that you see here, I'm very sure it's not everybody that understands it. And I must confess to you that I will not take that route. Not only you, myself, I will not take that route. I rather take the basic prices, the schedule of basic, and we'll do it. Yes? So that's it. So project-related challenges, material shortage, project abandonment, site client professionals. So here, like I mentioned, some of the desire of the architects. You know, the architects, they'll just come and do anything. They'll think from the blues and just design it. And when you do it, sometimes you don't even have who is going to make this dream into reality. It's not every of these materials that you're able to get who is doing it. I'll give you from a real life scenario. We are working now on something, on a project that some of the materials required, we actually do not see them here. You have to go off the Nigerian shore to procure them. And what it means in a project, time, cost, time is very essential. So if trying to get it, the time has elapsed or time has elongated, you see, it's a problem. So it's very important we have that understanding and build it during planning so that we don't create challenges for the project. Other site conditions, I have looked at dispute, which I said it's is a typical characteristics of construction project. Your ability as a quantity surveyor, for us in the private sector, you really need to understand that there must be dispute. However, the way and manner you reduce the occurrence of that dispute makes you a better quantity surveyor. And there are a number of ways that you should also embark on. Negative site conditions. I gave the example of the northeast and the northwest, or the south-south. Those are also challenges that will affect the progress of project-related challenges. So now I'm going to contractual issues. I've looked at within the private sector, this will also lead to this, but all the time there are issues when it comes to change. You hardly could have a contract from beginning to the end that does not have change. And that change, it could be variation, it could be fluctuation, it could be anything. And you heard here, the last speaker mentioned the types of fluctuation. He actually dwelt on ex gratia, non-contractual, non-legal. That is ex gratia for me. Then there are contractuals, because even the project management guy, he talked about scope. The client will wake up today and tell you that he needs this to be changed. If you are from the private sectors, you really need to prepare and have to do that, because we are there to protect the client. We're actually there as an independent person to tell him the truth. But this is his scope, desire. He wants to change it. That is eminent. It will happen. Delays. These are also contractual issues. When you have changes, in some cases, it will actually lead to delay. And this delay can affect the completion of the project. Termination. I have just been engaged on a project, and before I was engaged, there were issues with the former contractor. And I told them in a meeting, including the SSG, Governor Chief of Staff, Attorney General, Commissioner of Works, PAMSEC, the engineers, everybody, because it's a civil engineering project. And they said they want to terminate this contract. And I told them, please, don't tell the contractor that you want to terminate. You know why? When you send the signal the first time without going through events, I think it's the last speaker I mentioned about events, send notice. After so time, send another one, reminder. When you send it, because politicians will wake up that they have changed government, yes, you know, when politicians take over, and too bad that the previous government is not in their party, they would like to probe all activities that has happened. So if you have that kind of, they will say, okay, let's terminate it. When you terminate that, when you send him the signal of termination, definitely he's going to bounce back. The least he will do is to go to court and restrain the progress of that project. Who suffers? So there are numbers of ways that we should look at. If you are in the private sector and you are advising, it's very important you understand what leads to termination or what does not lead to termination. Termination will come. It could be from either party, but please let's understand the forms of contract we are using. Warranties, insurance. Insurance is to cover risk. Like I mentioned, there are risks that insurance does not cover, especially today. And any insurance company that wants to take it, let him spell it clearly. A number of quantity surveyors, we are really weak in reading policy. We don't read when they said insurance. You say, okay, give me all risk insurance. You don't know what it covers. I am appealing that let's be reading the content of every document that come before you on behalf of your client. It's very important. Those guys that talks about as contractors, you know, they will hide so many things. And you look at the last figure. This man is making a claim of 100 million, but the devil is in the detail. It's very important we look at the detail, especially if you choose to be a consultant. Not even consultant, as a quantity surveyor, it will help you. If you don't understand, call him. Let him explain to you. So that's it on insurance. Assignment or subcontracting, this also causes issues in a construction project. Poor tendering. Poor tendering goes with documentation, which also goes to the last one, professionalism and competency. I have always said it. I said now that I was not the best guy, and there are some things that I will not do even tomorrow, but to be honest with you, experience really matters. Experience matters in this our business. Training upon training really matters, because sometimes when you are attending training, even the trainer will ask and seek your knowledge, because you have done it before. What happens in project A will surely not going to happen in project B. We all know that. Now your understanding, and during the tea break, we discussed with one of our senior colleagues, and we're talking about hospitality. And he said he had a scenario where the contractor was asked to build a sample. And the contractor came back that who is going to pay? So there was a small argument. But if it's in my case, or I'm sure the senior colleagues here, the contractor knows that he should understand that ab initio he is going to build a sample, especially if you are doing hospitality business. If he's an experienced quantity surveyor or project manager with quantity surveying background, he should know that he needs to build that sample for him to obtain approvals. In our own case, depending on the kind of project you are doing, there's what is called shop drawing. The architect does not give details, especially in public sector. They don't give details at tender stage. And if you don't understand what is it that you are going to price, you should envisage there will be problem. So if you understand what is it that you are pricing, you price it, and you also price it in the prelims, because it's not all items that will be measured. So this will surely help. So professionalism is actually very important. And like I said, the poor tendering means documentation. If this documentation are not properly done, even the lowest responsive bidding they are talking about, to be honest with you, if it's properly done, it's acceptable. Because it depends on the specification. If I said I need a flush door, and somebody will just go and write to me 50,000, and somebody writes 10,000, and you look at that and you give him the guy of 10,000. But if I describe the flush door, 44 millimeter thick, fire rated or non-fire rated, this height, this, you understand? I am sure whoever is pricing it, he knows what he's going to write. He will definitely not going to write 10,000 for you. So at the end of the day, if the estimator or estimators have understood the exact specification of what is contained in the BOQ, you will see that there will be relatively plus or minus within the dispersion index 5 or 10% difference among the tenderers. Let me, how much time? 16 minutes. Okay, now my experience, success story. For you to be a very good consultant, this, I think you all agree with me, there are a number of excellent consultants in Nigeria. Those who have even practiced across the globe of the Nigerian shows. We have them everywhere. So this is actually my opinion for you to be a very successful in Nigeria today, because we keep transforming. Nigeria keep transforming, keep evolving, like I said, the infrastructures all the time we want to have the best infrastructure. So you really need someone who understands some of these things to help you so that you don't go at loss. Number one of the success factors I will advise everyone to look at is education and skill development. If you are a consultant, you really need to be educated. You really need to understand that quantity surveying, at least the basic ones. Today, if you are a consultant, somebody will tell you that he needs a quantity surveyor. But what are the roles of a quantity surveyor? It's beyond preparation of bill of quantities that you do or tender document. The claims that we talked about is a specialized knowledge area within the industry. It's very important we look at that. So you really need to be very educated, and when you talk, for those of us who, like I mentioned, the Shehu, the El Rufai, those are the things that they used to do for us. We used to see them at the top. But what today, so some of us here, we have done some extra courses. Before then, Chief Akiwi, you will be a witness, we never had PPP in Nigeria. We don't even have arbitration. But today there are construction arbitrators. And these trainings they do carry that with NIQS. They will teach you how to resolve disputes as an expert within the industry. Knowledge of the market, customer needs. Your client will tell you, this is what I want. If you don't understand, some people, they don't understand. Sometimes you even need to tell the architect when he comes back with the briefing in terms of sketches or whatever. So you really need to give him that understanding. And this is where I was mentioning the case of sample or shop drawing. If you don't understand the project well, you're going to mislead everybody. You're going to have an under budget for that item. So by tomorrow, the client will tell you, but this is what I need. I want it to be the standard of Transcope. Maybe the room, if it's a hospitality, I want to have a standard of Transcope. And you are looking at, you just want it to be a room with some facilities are not there. So it's important you understand the market and knows the client's need. Number 3, I mentioned hard work and commitment. You will agree with me that not even in school, if you want to attain excellent result, you really need to put on effort. Similarly, if you want to be a good consultant, if you want to run your office, there is no running. You cannot run away from that. You have to, just like the lawyers, the doctors are doing. You need to have, in fact, some of us, we have libraries in their offices. Personally, I don't have Saturday and Sunday. If you want to see me, unless if it's during public holiday. But if it's weekend, I spend so much time in my office. And I urge everybody to look at that. You can, depending on your family, let me make a caveat here. Depends on your family. So you really need to be hard work and committed to the business. High quality network. At the end of this workshop, I'm sure you will find 1 or 2 persons that you have not seen, or 1 or 2 persons that you've added to your network. You met him here. There are people during our education, the network was within our class, our department, our faculty, in the hostel, training, workshop, religious gathering, and so many areas. So it's important we have high quality network. And what that does for private sector is that, you know, this is off record though. In Nigeria, sometimes it's who you know. How do you know the person? It's through your network. So it's very important, even if he's not going to assist in influencing your selection, but at least information is very important. Versatility, there is resilience and adaptability, versatility and diversity of capacity. Today, you've heard it from the project managers background, people who are project managers, but I believe they are quantity surveyors. You've also heard from the contractual side. Now you are hearing it from the consultant side. Some people are there, if you have gone beyond the Nigerian shores and you see the kind of quantity surveyor they're looking at. Nobody tells you he's looking for a quantity surveyor, just quantity surveyor. He will tell you a commercial manager. He will tell you that he's looking for an estimator. He will tell you that he's looking for a contract manager, procurement, that's procurement. So there are also a number of knowledge areas that it's important if you are actually doing consultancy. Within this period, as you grow, you need to add some of these caps to your feather. Like I said, knowledge is power. If you are not knowledgeable, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I think you should forget it. In this, our business, it's very, very important to be knowledgeable because the challenges, like we said, the trying times are not today, they are not yesterday. It has always been there. And your error for not knowing it will cause the employer or the client so much loss. That is what is called the PI, professional indemnity. You know that now clients are asking for that in case if you are not able to deliver the project according to what they want. So the proven way to maximize the Nigerian construction industry holds immense opportunity for social economic development of the country and profitability business, like we have heard it today. The proven way to maximize the opportunity is for players like us to develop and understand the factors influencing performance in the industry. I've mentioned some of the factors here. Our success depends on our knowledge of forces, shaping opportunities and posing threats. This presentation has been all about those factors. There is this Robert scholar, right? He said, tough times don't last, but tough people do. Do you agree with that? Thank you very much. So they said, hard times create strong men. And strong men create good times. So stay strong. Which is the same thing as no pain, no gain. Summarily, I had 40 minutes, is it? So I've been able to talk about the understanding within the industry, where I talked about the emerging issues, environment, current conditions, and also the second outline, we talked about the challenges and the opportunities and the critical factors that's according to my experience. I think I've been really very good with the time. So if there's any question, I'll be happy to take it.
Thank you very much for for the yeah, can we do much better, please? We thank you most sincerely for this presentation. It goes to show that, you know, the more you progress, the more you summarize issues. When I was looking at the short bio we have of him, I realized that in 2021, he was actually given the Young Professional Award by the National Daily Blueprint newspaper. I don't know whether QS still belong. Even as we stand now, a lot of young people are pushing us away. They are saying we should belong to the other category. But we thank you very much for this presentation and for all you have been doing in raising the young quantity surveyors. So very quickly, we will move into the question and answer segment. But unfortunately, one of the resource person had to leave because he has a scheduled flight for 4 p.m. That's QS Tomi Ogundari. But I'm sure within the presenters, we may have one or two people who may likely respond to whatever question we have in his own presentation. As QS Aminu mentioned, you know, there are things that some of us will not try. So project management, I think, is also something that I will never try. I rather stay in the contract management domain than going into the Kanban, the Scrum. You know, these are words that I'm sure some people are just learning these words today. Possibly I'm one of them. You know, when he was speaking, some languages we were understanding, but most of the languages were struggling hard to follow him. But I mean, what is important that we should note for those who have interest in project management, immediately after this workshop, please, you should go back, look at that paper. I was telling my colleague in the council, QS, wrote to me yesterday that there was a certification I did, the C3, P3, that was done by QS Academy. We were on the course with QS Uvia Kimpelu. The facilitator for the Module 2 and Module 3 was a very boring facilitator. I mean, from one of these Eastern African countries, you struggle to even understand what she's saying. That was how we went through, and that was like the longest. The second aspect of the certification, that's the second module, and the third module were the longest. She is, I think, a Swahili, I don't know whether from a Dutch or a Swahili that transformed to an East African. So it was a very difficult session for us. We struggled. But what helped me to pass the courses was actually the NIQS conferences that were done on public-private partnership around 2008 to 2010 or 11. That was my saving grace. We paid a lot of money for that certification. The facilitator couldn't facilitate very well, but I had to rely on the knowledge I retained previously and the interest I had because of attending the workshop and conferences of NIQS, you know, to master that subject. And I had reason not to struggle or suffer, because if it was because of only that facilitation, believe you me, the dollars we have paid could have gone down. So what am I saying? It's an opportunity, particularly for young people, that you are getting exposed to these issues. We deliberately decided to widen the horizon. I mean, you have people who basically have been doing construction, talking to us, people who have been doing project management, people who are in consultancy, talking to us. And I was also telling the deputy president when they came back that I will have to report QSCJ Michael for what he did. Mr. President, I was also telling you that maybe because of the amount of knowledge we have transferred, possibly the National Executive Council should consider raising the workshop fee. I mean, when you went for the courtesy visit, you had to go. The speakers that spoke from QS Tomi Ogundari to QS CJ Michael, they went above board. I mean, what they delivered, if we are actually to charge for what they delivered, Possibly we'll be charging 120 or even 150,000. But I mean, whatever it is that you pay for knowledge from what we have heard from the presentation of our senior member is not wasted. It's actually an investment. And the best investment you can make in information and knowledge worker age is actually to acquire more knowledge. So please be prepared as members of Nigerian Institute of Quantity Surveyors. We will have more knowledge working sessions to do for you. Please make out budgets. Invest in knowledge. We will do more workshop, but all we require is actually your support. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort to put in this workshop. So if we have workshops, if we ask you just to part with a token to contribute to the development of the profession and the institute, please do and encourage others to do. Thank you very much, and I will want to invite our speakers to these few seats that we have to respond to whatever questions that the participants have for you. The speakers, please, in no particular order, you can be on the stage to respond to whatever questions the participants will have for you. QS Numbere, I know you have some unattended questions, so you can help us start. Maybe the president should also provide some form of moral support for the facilitators, so you can please join them on the stage. Moral support. we are ethically guided. Yes, I think we can give the president the middle seat. QS Aminu, you can, yes, yield the, yes. The president is providing moral support. So, yes.
Because I was not here for most of the time, I thought I was going to give them immoral support. Well, this gladdens my heart, the kind of contributions and presentations we've had since yesterday. And I think the major takeaway for me, which I think all of us should also have at the back of our mind, was the statement by QS Faith Eziugo, who said, look, our battle should not be within. Our battle should be more outside this realm. And what she meant by that is that we should be willing to share knowledge amongst ourselves in order to be able to keep away those who are struggling to take over our roles. If we continue to fight ourselves, or if we continue to hoard, let me use that word, it's not fight. If we continue to hoard information because we think if we share that information, some of our colleagues will use the same information to get us out of it. We're only wasting our time. Whereas those who are performing the roles and the function we should be doing, they are still doing this. We should be more interested in getting more people to come on board as QSs. So that by the time we all come together to talk to government, by the time government listens to QS Faith Eziugo, QS Abaka Suleiman, QS CJ Michael, QS Jamabi Nombere and Tommy Ogundari, government will understand what we are saying, what value we are given, if we will be giving, if we are engaged. That's the whole idea. And that's why we've tried as much as possible to make our workshop and conferences to be knowledge sharing. Not just for people to come and listen to speeches from people, but to gain something that will be useful to them in their practice of this QS profession. So I want to commend everyone that has come, the paying participants, as well as those that are online. And my sincere hope is that every one of us that has participated has gained something from this workshop. So on that note, I think I will yield the microphone now for the questions to start flowing. And I'm sure our people here will be ready to provide answers and solutions. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. So, Numbere, you note your questions. You will be the first to respond to the questions you had previously. Yes. So please, those who will want to ask questions, just indicate by raising hand. Okay. 1. We're not coming back. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7. So, number 1, please. Your name, who you are directing the question to, and then your question.
Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. My name is Kiezaji Yolajide, Chapter Chairman of Cross River State. My question goes to the case that talked about a fluctuation claim. CJ, yes. Please, in a situation whereby a contractor has a fluctuation claim submission on a live project in 2023, and it took the client about 3 years before they finally respond and pay or show willingness to pay. Was the contractor entitled to loss of revenue, or he should just collect the money and lick his wound? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Number 2. My number 2, please. Who is number 2? Okay. So please, those who are outside, it's an order that they will not participate in the lunch. They should lock our door.
Good afternoon, House. My name is QS Carlo, FCT chapter, and my question goes to QS CJ Michael. I'm aware that normally for you to claim for fluctuations, the project has to have at least a lifespan of 6 months at least. But bearing in mind what has happened this year with the subsidy removal and the floating of the dollar, which has almost 100% increased the value of the dollar, is it still advisable? What would you advise a contractor who has been in projects in 6 months within this period to claim for fluctuation? Thank you.
Number 3. Okay.
I am Hikiato Peter, FCT chapter. My question goes to the president himself. The first question is, how can the institute harness the contributions of the speakers and provide a content that we can have on television, we can have on YouTube, we can have on Facebook? Because when I was married, my wife, she didn't know who quantity surveyors are. So what can we do about that? Secondly, how can the institute work out a framework of creating a database, first for inflation, secondly for rates, thirdly for rates, inbuilt in the app that every professional can go and check and is verifiable. Then lastly, we are going digital. When will NIQS have an application or a software that we can proudly say that we developed? Thank you.
The reason for moral support is becoming clear.
Sorry, let me quickly, because I didn't present any paper, but I think all he's asking has to do with the institute. So let me just quickly run through them and put what have you. You see, what you have only asked for is how do we put quantity survey or NIQS on the front burner. And what I always tell people, this is not the job of NIQS. This is a job for all quantity surveyors. Wherever we belong, we must let people around us. For instance, your own students association, if I remember, make sure you showcase yourself and what you do there. On your street, as a member of your residents association, showcase what you do there. In your place of worship, showcase yourself there. In your social organization, whether you are Rotary Lion or you are a member of the Polo Club or the Golf Club and any of these clubs, showcase what you do there. You know, because the only way, if you say NIQS, everybody think NIQS, but don't forget, you have elected members, about 15 of them that are in the council, and we have to cover the entire country. What you want us to do might involve somebody doing it as a project or as employment. That is 5 days of the week, 8 to 5. Are you willing to pay? So, because there is now the opportunity cost that somebody like me and a lot of other members of the council, for instance, we need to forego our primary responsibility, which is our own private businesses, to focus on NIQS. But then somebody has to take care of our family. Are you willing to take care of our family for us? But if all of us see it as a collective responsibility by making sure that wherever we are, we demonstrate our skills so that people will appreciate what we do, then it will be no brainer. On the issue of the database, of course, we have a database. Incidentally, I was speaking with somebody. At a point, there were issues in the sense that KSRBN was trying to, NIQS first started, they actually had a committee that had done some preliminary work on database. But you see, it's not just about creating database. You have to update on a regular basis. So how do you make that database sustainable? That was the problem. While NIQS was talking about their own, everybody just set up. KSRBN2 was thinking of establishing a database. And we were thinking, look, why will the two bodies that are to serve quantity surveyors in Nigeria have two different databases? So we decided, that is between the NIQS and the KSRBN, that we'll have a joint committee. If I was discussing with somebody this afternoon, that look, we've been on this idea of appointing somebody who will lead, because we are going to commercialize it. As a matter of fact, it's a revenue generating source that we have not even been looking at, and at which we have been losing money on. Because if you can imagine that if NIQS, KSRBN, if you have a joint database that is regularly updated, because initially when KSRBN is being funded, up till now by government, we are hoping that they will fund it. The NIQS will be the one that will do the update, in the sense that you have chapters. All the various chapters, the NIQS will commission them to help gather data. The money for gathering that data will be paid by the KSRBN from the funds from the government. But like I said, so that is the modality that we want to employ, which we have not finalized yet. But I can tell you that it's something that is at the top of our mind that we need to do. Because like I said, it's a source of income. The only people that will have access will be only those who have paid their subscription. And then any other non-QS who wants to have access will pay. So, it's a no-brainer. It's something that I'm sure if in this tenure we are not able to finalize it, the incoming tenure, I'm sure she'll be able to. Because like I said, it's a source of revenue. I hope I've answered all your questions. Thank you very much. So please go ahead with other questions.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'm Zakari Ilyasu Isa from Nasara State chapter. My question is, I don't know who will answer it. It's a scenario we have in the office now. I'm working in a public office. As a young quantity surveyor, from the knowledge of preparing bill of quantity, at the end of the day, they will add VAT. Now the office instructs. That is our chief executive instructs that VAT should not be added in the bill again. Because it's shown that at the end of the day, it is government that are paying the tax. Why not the contractor that after his own business is supposed to pay the VAT? So I'm confused. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Madam, we have you. I think you are the second to the last.
My name is Efe Elumeze, Lagos chapter. I'm asking a question on the scenario I have on my table now. I'm in M&E, I'm a quantity surveyor M&E. The bill, I got a contract. The contract was paid 75% to fix the contract, and the clients traveled. So the M&E consultant brought in someone to supply the lighting fitting. He took it out of the contract. He said he wants him to supply it. But we have been paid on that. So the person supplied, got approval for him, supplied to site, and then sent in an invoice to my office. In that case, what claim can I take for that particular item, and what clause can I use to support my claim so that I will be able to get back some money? Because the M&E knows the price on the bill for that particular item. The invoice the person submitted to my office is about the same price we quoted for the job. So I'm actually having prices for just installation only. The overhead I had for the supply team for that particular item. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope.
Good evening. My name is Obosi Chinedu. My question, well, with regards to what QS Aminu, marketing gain that we can achieve through our training and branding when we are able to, maybe even through the workshops that can add it to our CVs. And
Dr. Chukwemeka Ogbu of the NIQ. Developed from prices of commodities that affect different sectors. You know, you have housing, sometimes very difficult to get a particular specific index for construction sector. You can have housing, that's a different thing. So how robust then is the formula you are to use with respect to the construction industry? So that becomes my question. Then number two, maybe Mr. President will help me on that one, is when will we start talking about tender price indices, where we would not have to, use indices that were based on price of vegetable and stuff? When can we start having this institute develop tender price indices that colleagues can use, and the level of accuracy in prediction of tender prices will be even far more accurate? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we are all done from this side, and what we have basically are questions, and questions. Tender price index, CPI, and a lot of other issues. Mr. President, we are done from this side. We will listen to...
No, I thought I didn't present any paper.
Yes.
I'm only here to support them morally.
That's it. Yes.
On behalf of Mr. President, I think let me also help to answer the tender price index. You know, the pricing actually in Nigeria today, we have the regulators of public spending, which I mentioned, the Bureau for Public Procurement. I think sometimes they have categories even of contractors. And before now, there are numbers of, I used to know there is one firm, either Proman or something, who was publishing price book, something like that. And it takes state by state. So I don't think there is any international institute that produces that price index as you are requesting. The reason for our Nigeria, we have even a peculiar case. If you now benchmark your price within this month, for a number of factors like we mentioned, we just had it from May 29, a pronouncement by the government had changed everything. It will not work. But basic prices like they mention the price and budget intelligence. There are some agencies that have that unit, and those are basic prices, which you also can see even on our national daily or in the media. They will actually help you to build. And this also brings my conviction on that I will not use the CPR method or the index method of fluctuation. I rather use the basic price, because it's a difference of that basic price of material, labor, and equipment. So by that, which even if it's 100 years and today, I'm sure it's a straightforward arithmetic, we can adopt it and everybody will understand it. This is it from, thank you.
Well, sorry, I know. You see, the only reason why I didn't want to take on, because I felt the more important questions are the ones that has to do with the presentation. Because the question you asked was almost the answer I gave the young man there about the institute trying to get a database, because we do realize there's no way you talk about database that you won't talk about the price index. Well, until we have that up and running, we're wasting our time. Before that, before the program that he talked about, cosines books, the one that was done by late past president of Foreign, was also doing something similar to that, gathering prices all over the place. But we were thinking of the one that, when you say it is the institute or the QSRBA, it's like it has been institutionalized, you know, so that it can work across board for us. It will be well calculated. But like I said, yes, over the years, maybe our attention has been taken by so many other things. For instance, just like he's talking about, we spend more time now on advocacy. Because without advocacy, how will we get people to know what we are doing? And that's why I said you cannot leave it to the people in the executive council alone. Every one of us will have to be involved in this advocacy fight. That's just the bottom line. If we are all involved, if we all sell quantity surveying wherever we are, either social, religious, or even recreational, I'm sure we will be able to get a lot of people to appreciate what we do. So I'll still make some comments on some of the whatever, but let me allow the people that actually did the presentation, let them talk more. So we'll start with QS Faith and then we'll go this way.
Okay, before I answer the questions directed at me, I just want to add something to this particular question the President has just answered. There is something I see across different organizations that is not right. And that is that in our quantity surveying department, our commercial department, we do not have price data repositories. Before you solve the bigger problem, have you sorted out the local problem within where you manage? I don't know why young quantity surveyors will not put data together, put price data together, store it over a period of time, update it, and it becomes a live document that even the organization can begin to make reference to. I know a whole lot of times I have to query, why is this price not in the repository? A lot of young QSs, they don't want to do that. But I remember when I was growing up, that was one of my assignments. Every week, go and get this price, update it. The Excel sheet was so robust that as at this date, as at this exchange rate of this was the price of this was the market price of this was the market price at this market, this was the market price at this market, and within the organization, we had it. And it was easy for continuity. We can also do that. In most of our organizations, even as quantity surveyors, we don't have this basic repository. So when we don't know how to solve the local problems that we have, everybody is looking up to the institute. Yet, to get that of the institute will take a while. But I think we should first start from our individual organizations and start putting this data together. and you see what you'll be able to achieve over a period of time. And maybe the institute can solicit it for such information when they are ready. But I think we can all do something. Thank you. On the questions directed to me, okay, on VAT. So the issue of VAT is this. It's important you are sure of what are the components of your rates. Now, the issue of VAT has been mismanaged in diverse ways. You have, when building up our rates, most times we do not put it. But on the overall, we build in the VAT before you get the final figure. That is one way. You have some clients that will tell you they don't pay VAT. Yet, the contractor will be charged for VAT. So how do you incorporate that into the rate that you have built? That is one scenario. There is another scenario. You have a particular cost for a particular item. And for example, you want to sublet that part of the work, that particular item of work. What I see some of us do is that we do not take the VAT element in preparing our comparison. So you are doing a comparison that has a VAT item against a comparison without a VAT item. Without the VAT element, sorry. It doesn't work. If these things are not treated in the same way, sometimes the margins we think we are making are not actually the real margins, because by the time you bring out the VAT element, you find out that the margin is not as good as it is looking. So we should take time and look at these things critically. If you are going to, as the contractor, you know you are going to be charged, you have to also extend it to any subcontract you are giving out. I have a client that says he doesn't pay VAT. I'm not VATable. There is no argument about that. Let's have your VAT exemption certificate. Once we have your VAT exemption certificate, for every transaction we do with you, we ensure that that is, we put a copy of that side by side. When the taskmasters come, they will not listen to the client does not pay VAT. If he doesn't pay VAT, where is his VAT exemption? Oh, we forgot to charge this particular, we forgot to charge VAT element on this particular scope of the work. Then you'll be the one to bear the VAT. Because when it is time for you to do your accounting returns for the year, you have to, somebody has to pay. And if you are careless with the treatment, you will be the one to pay. But anyhow, it just has to be paid. So we should be careful to be sure that these are well treated and pass back to the client. Because in the overall, it is the client that pays. Thank you. There is a question on, you have an MEP project, 75% of it has been paid to fix the price, and suddenly along the line, a scope of it or some materials were taken off your scope with or without your consent and was supplied by another. What type of claims can you make? That is, I've seen that on so many projects. So the first thing is, when you need to first understand, check, was it done with your consent? Were you aware? That is one. If it was done with your consent, what were the documentation that followed immediately you got that information? Some of us, when we get such information, we do not do anything until the deed is done. There is no documentation, there is no correspondence, you have not said anything, or probably you are trying to dare the consultants whether they cannot do it. But you have the right to a claim of loss of profit. So, because at the time you were tendering, there are some parameters that informed your decision for your profit margin. And that scope of work that was taken was contributed to whatsoever you have presented. If that is taken out, with or without your consent, you can claim for loss of profit. Just ensure you know how to compute your loss of profit and submit it, and stand your ground, and it will be paid, it will be treated. A good consultant will treat it. As contractors, we should no longer allow consultants to source up and down. They take a part of your contract, they expect you to swallow it. Maybe I've just taken, but there is the global picture. And that is what they do not consider when they do such pull out of your contract. So, also it's important that you read the terms of your contract and be sure that there is a clause you can refer to. And if you have had such experience, in your next contract, look out for clauses that can cover you in case such things happen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think before I answer mine, there is an area she pinched me. I should say something about it. If you remember in my presentation, among the challenges or contractual issues, I mentioned assignment and subcontracting. It's actually a challenge within the industry. And you'll agree with me that the question the lady has asked is something to do with that. Now, in my opinion, the first thing you should look at is what form of contract are you using? Is this the contract that you even have a consultant or not? It doesn't matter whether a consultant or no consultant. Like she said, if the form of contract or the conditions of contract does not empower the employer to assign or subcontract that part, then you now apply, you now claim for this loss of profit. But if it does that, you know, perhaps you only be paid for attendance, not loss of profit. This is what I want to say. It is not everywhere that you will be paid loss of profit because it depends on the conditions of contract. So it's very important you understand the conditions of contract, what are your obligations, what are the employer's obligations, so that we don't fall into this kind of pitfalls. Back to the question that was directed to me, the young man here asked of the names. Is it names or knowledge areas that quantity surveyors? You know, because Nigeria were born out of United Kingdom as our common, our colonial masters. So even the nomenclature, the terms that we use are the same, that of United Kingdom. So quantity surveying, it's only mostly in countries where they actually have very close ties with the United Kingdom. For those of us out of United Kingdom, if you go to America, I'm sure if you keep telling somebody quantity surveying, you know, you need to tell him, sometimes you have to go to dictionary. Then they will, oh, this is what you mean, or in the French countries. In America, they call it engineering, cost engineering. They call it cost engineering. But what I mean here is that even in Nigeria today, some people, they will put in advert, they're looking for a commercial contractor. This commercial contractor, when you look at the roles, you will see that it is mostly of quantity surveying because it's what you do. And that's why I say if you're in the practice, if you're in the consultancy, you see a number of activities that you carry out from planning stage or from initiative, according to project management, through the planning, through the execution, until closeout. So, estimators generally believe that this are works of people that does bill of quantities. You sit down in an office and do some pricing and prepare bills and things like that. Commercial, those contractor QS, those are the commercial. Contract management are those that specializes in procurement, because this is a planning service that you do to ensure all those standard stuff they do. So there are others. Some people will tell you, like she said, I have a client. If anybody is even competent in that, please see me. He needs a quantity surveyor who understands the form of contract, FIDIC, JCT, and the likes. That vacancy is open. If you have it, please talk to me privately. And so these are administrators, contract administrators, isn't it? So there are contract administration role that quantity surveyors can do that. However, it's not only quantity surveying that does contract administration. Other professions also can really understand that aspect or that role, and they will do it perfectly. A number of it, I mentioned arbitration. I mentioned, so claims expert. There is also claims expert. Some people are looking for claims expert. You can be a quantity surveyor, you build your competency in that direction, and you see it's really a hot cake. It's not also a quantity surveying only that can be a claims expert, but quantity surveyors are best, because at the end of the day, it's Naira and Kobo or USD with cent that comes out of it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that very question that you asked about the one about VAT. I just want to add my thoughts to what has been said so far on that. Let me start from that point. When it comes to VAT, contractors need to be careful, because whether you like it or not, from the name VAT, value added task, it simply means that if you're in the business of contracting, your major source of income is all about creating values. And at the end, you will be tasked for those values that you have created. So if you're working with a client who doesn't pay VAT, just like QS Faith already said, make sure you're able to secure the evidence of that exemption. It is very important. Otherwise, before you can be able to get your corporate tax certificate for that period, you may end up losing some of the money that you have gathered as profit, all in the name of paying for VAT that somebody did not eventually pay for you. So it's very important that you pay it. And like I always establish it, whenever you're preparing your costing documents, try to separate your VAT away from what you're looking at as your money. We have a tradition of keeping VAT below the contractor's costs, so that you don't end up, even if it is a place where it will be deducted, you know that what you're looking at is here, whereas by the time you add VAT, you also remove VAT. You're not shorting any of your money. But some people may make the mistake of deducting VAT before deducting other payments, especially when they are administering certificates of payment. That is actually taking somebody's money. It's wrong practice. I've seen it where it is done like that. VAT is supposed to be one of the last components that you deduct, or you add rather, when you're talking about adding payment certificates. It's the last components that you add. But when you add VAT and you're deducting other things, that means you're withholding a portion of that VAT. You're not supposed to withhold VAT. It's supposed to be deducted immediately. So that is on that. And also, the first question somebody asked from this side said, can a contractor claim for delayed payments? If such conditions were not established in your contract, I'm afraid you may not be able to claim anything for delayed payments. That is why you need to also understand the condition of contract that you're operating on. I remember very well in our early years in school, we are told to memorize some of these conditions of contract. When you mention a particular clause, somebody already knows what are the contents, what to expect from that. So as it stands today, we are presently occupied with so many forms of contract. Then it was mostly JCT that was mostly available. But today we are looking at FIDIC, we are looking at NEC, we are looking at SBC and the rest of them. But please, no matter which conditions of contract that is available to you, always make sure that you try to read some of those clauses. Try to know some of those clauses that are very important. When it has to do with conditions of clauses that define defaults, try to understand some of them and what are the conditions that have been provided for you there. If maybe you want to make your claims, it's also very important that you also try to know what you are claiming about. Earlier, I told us about what I call the claim bubble. Yes, somebody can tell you can actually claim for extension of time, you can claim for profit, you can claim for this. But at the end, when you look at the provisions and you discover that you're not qualified to actually merit any of those claims that you're asking. So it becomes more like a mirage, even though you are feeling the odds, but you cannot be able to assess the claim that you think is due to you. Then also it says, what should contractors claim due to subsidy of the last subsidy that was removed? Well, one of the things that the contractor can actually claim is if he's able to establish a marginal fluctuation in the prices of his basic materials, he can actually claim for that. And if he's able to establish also that there are labor increments, because of the government is already giving that indication that the prices of labor is going to change. As soon as the NLC and the government finalize that discussion, that is to say that a new minimum wage will be coming up. So a contractor can also look in that direction that he's more or less going to be claiming on labor. But when it comes to something like equipment and diesel, you may not be able to make much claims out of that because construction work is actually being powered by diesel and not by petrol. We have said it in the course of our earlier discussion today. So also have that at the back of your mind that if you're going to make claims, look at valid areas where you have legitimate claims and not go about fishing, trying to see whether you can be able to catch anything when there are nothing for you to catch there. And then finally, somebody talked about CPI. Well, some contracts actually recommend some of these sources of indices that you're supposed to work on. And if the contract is recommending NBS as a source for the indices that you're supposed to be working on, you have no business leveraging on your basic price of materials because a direction has been given to you. During the course of my presentation, I mentioned to us the typical pointers that are supposed, the ways that you're supposed to, the typical points that a fluctuation clause is supposed to contain for you to know. And one of such things that I mentioned is that it's supposed to tell you the source of the indices that you're going to be using, the calculation methods, and other things that are mentioned in that listing. So it's very important. Once that contract is telling you that you're supposed to be taking your indices from CBN, it simply means that you don't have any other business going to NBS to go and take whatever forex indices that they have on that place. Because doing that, somebody can actually void that claim because you're not using the right indices for the right projections that you're going to be making. But it is also very important to know that when you're talking about fluctuation, what you're actually talking about is just inflation. So the right authority to give you information, rightful information, verifiable information on inflation, it's the NBS, the National Bureau of Statistics. So I don't really think you might be entirely wrong in for a way to shift away some of those responsibilities, some of the risk of price inflations that may be existing on your project. If you are able to secure from them, give us your quotation. Give us like validity period of 60 days. Once they're able to send in validity period of 60 days, automatically they have already caged themselves within that bracket. And you, a contractor, if you're going ahead to go and do that, I don't think you're faulted in any way. What you have ended up doing is transferring the risk burden of price escalations on your project down to the subcontractor. And of course, for every money you're going to be advancing to him, he has to secure it with a bid security, with a bid bond, and as well as a performance bond. So that at every point in time he defaults, you have something you can always fall back to recoup some of the losses that you have incurred. I think that should be all that I have taken for now. Thank you.
Okay. Let me add my voice to the issue of VAT from a public perspective. And I'll just use an example of an experience and a meeting we had with a contractor. You know, some contractors, once they are awarded a contract, they just look at the total amount. They don't go to the BOQ or even to say, okay, let's look at the summary page to see how this amount is broken down. So I believe the contractor was expecting, when he received the payment, that, let's say the contract is 100 million naira, inclusive of VAT and contingency. Now, when you are bidding for a job, you don't add contingency in your rate. It is the procuring entity that will decide what will be the contingency. Because they can decide to add contingency across board for everybody. Or individual contractor. If that amount is not put there, individual contractors too can estimate to say this is what they think that should be the contingency for this project. For instance, if that space is left blank. But that does not form the basis of evaluation. What forms the basis of evaluation is the subtotal before contingency and VAT. So this particular contractor was complaining that 12.5% was deducted from his money. And when we had the meeting, we looked at it, and it was made known to him that, first of all, 7.5% is not your money. It's government money being paid to government. For example, I ask you to buy for me this couch, and you tell me that this couch is 300,000. 300,000 being that you know that you buy it maybe 200,000 at the shop, you're going to transport it for maybe 10,000 naira to the site where I asked you to bring it to. Then you're going to pay somebody to fix it in position where I want you to fix it. Then, of course, you're going to add your profit and other overhead expenses that you will incur in the process of doing this. After you have given me your price, I now add 7.5 on top, 7.5% being responsibility. Now, we don't have issue with VAT, 7.5%. But where we had issue was withholding tax. Because the 12.5% that was deducted comprises of 7.5% VAT and 5% withholding tax. So it became an issue because probably the contractor did not envisage at the time of bidding that there are tax liabilities. Because at that time we also called an accountant to the meeting to explain. And he said there are tax liabilities. You are coming to do business. So apart from the VAT, government is giving you to collect back to government. You, as a businessman, you have liabilities to pay tax. In terms of personal income tax, there are different taxes to be paid. So what they do is that they withhold 5% of your money and keep it aside. At the end of the tax year, you go and get your credit notes and all of those other taxes that you paid, and you present it. When you present it, they will compare it with what was deducted. You have to claim the balance or pay excess thereof if it arises. So as a businessman, you need to understand all those liabilities that you need to pay and know how to build it into your rate. So that when it is deducted, you will not complain because you already understand what and what you need to pay, what and what liabilities. Because you are doing business for government, at the end of the day, government will still pay you. So that is what experience we had concerning VAT and then withholding tax. I know we have been mentioning VAT, but we did not mention withholding tax, which was a problem in Rivers State. Then these questions have been very long. They were asked. In case I don't get it correctly, you can bring it up again. Somebody talked about veto power of the governor of Rivers State to award a contract. That is under section 21(4) of the Rivers State Public Procurement Law. And I think it corresponds to what somebody was asking. Is this why there is successful project delivery? 21.4 talks about power of the governor, then payment of 75% mobilization. And everybody understands the body language of the governor in Rivers State. And if you follow him very well, there is something we call Iyendeba, Iyendeba. So if government will do their part, you too, you need to do your part. That's what it means. Iyendeba, Iyendeba. So that is it. So government will do their part. You, contractor, do your part. So I think that is what has worked for the governor. He understands what he wants. He ensures the policies are in place to make them work. And he follows the process in line with the Rivers State Public Procurement Law. And somebody, James from Bayelsa, talked about political contractors. Yes, man is a political animal. Businessmen are politicians, and politicians are businessmen. The thing is that there is a process to follow. We all understand how our country and the society operates. People invest their money in businesses. People invest their monies in politics. So definitely, they will do business. But that doesn't mean that because you're a politician, you will just go with paper to government house and collect contract. It doesn't work like that. There are processes to follow. If you are a contractor and you're a politician, you have a construction company, you will bring it forward for pre-qualification. If you don't meet the criteria, it will be thrown out. And politicians, during election, they come up with manifestos. People who are smart, they key into some of these manifestos and come up with proposals and submit to government. If the government sees that, okay, this proposal will help my manifesto, they may buy in, but then it will still come to due process to say, okay, let's do this. Once the process is clear and it is a genuine proposal, it will be considered. Then my Oga at the top is just here. He was asking about if the 75% is prone to materials, is for materials that are prone to fluctuation, or is on the entire contract sum. Yes, it's on the entire contract sum. The contractor should know where to deploy the resources to those materials that are prone to fluctuation to ensure that he is able to deliver the projects within the budget, within schedule, so that we will get value for money. They also talked about the needs assessment. If the Bureau does the needs assessment, no, it's not the Bureau, it's the MDAs that they do the needs assessment, whether the emergency situation arises or they are able to foresee and do it ahead of time. But when they do it, it must come to the Bureau for review before certification. Otherwise, they will not be able to award those contracts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Please, before the comment there, just one or two issues on this VAT.
Sorry, I think we only just, I'm sorry, you see,
yes,
we have induction.
Induction, yes, sir.
And it's almost 6. This 5, almost 5.
Yes, sir.
We'll probably need to rearrange this hall for the induction ceremony. So if we continue like this, we might not leave here by 6. And the induction, if you look at the program, it's supposed to start at 6, even though deep inside me, I realize that I cannot start earlier than 7 if we are lucky. So I want to crave your indulgence that I will only probably take just one more question, then I will allow QS Aminu Suleiman to make his final remark. I will close, and then we'll get the Deputy President to move the vote of thanks and close this.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I think I am not even giving a question. The VAT issue, we should just understand the fact that it's governed by law. You work in the public sector. Now, what you should do is to draw the attention of your superior to the VAT Act. Now, in the VAT Act, you, as a public entity, you have a responsibility of collecting and remitting VAT. It's different when you're dealing, I think yesterday we explained that. Now, if I'm servicing a private sector man, he is supposed to pay me the VAT as somebody who is providing that service, and I remit the VAT to him. If as government, state government, you don't pay VAT, draw your august attention to the fact that a day will come when FIRS will visit your office and they will insist that you pay the backlog of all the VATs that you're supposed to have deducted and remit to it. Now, it is done so because VAT is still a federal issue. You know, it's pooled at the federal level and shared. It's actually something for another day, but that is what most subnationals do. They try to avoid VAT issues because they feel it adds to their construction cost. I've worked with a subnational for 1 year as a member of a task force, and those were the issues we argued. You know, they didn't want to pay VAT, and what I advised then, what I advised the consultant, the contractors that worked with them is, immediately they pay you your money, file, because every 21st day of the month you're supposed to file your VAT returns. You file your VAT returns, tell them that a state has withheld your VAT. If any taxman comes to your office, I will show you the paper that I've filed. Go and collect your money where you're supposed to collect. So advise him to read that law very well. Consult the office of the Attorney General of your state. You will be advised accordingly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ahmed. Very well spoken. This is a final note for me. Remember, in my presentation, I talked about knowledge and skills. And even here, in this room now, you could hear that there are confliction in fluctuation explaining it. What I mean confliction here is, the doctor from Edo has said that the CPI, it includes commodities, not construction. Now, my learned colleague here has also said that if the contract is carrying, that you should adopt the index. So what it is for us in the private sector, it's very, very important you understand when you are helping your client to prepare a contract document. There is no ambiguity. You shouldn't make room for ambiguity in the contract. That's what it means. Anything that you think that will cause confusion, dispute, conflict, reduce it to the minimum, to the barest minimum. Please, it's very important. And this is where knowledge also comes to play. The second thing I want to talk about here is the delays. The same, my colleague also said that if it does not contain in the contract between the employer and the employee, that it will not be applicable, because he has made a request for fluctuation, but it was paid after 3 years. Am I correct? Now, you see, this is also where you need a legal knowledge. If the basic JCT that we learned in school, there is delay in payment. I hope you all remember that. If a payment exceeds 41 days or 30, Correct. 14 days. So if it exceeds that, if, for example, that is not even contained in the contract, the deed between you and your employer, common law says that nobody is going to hold your money for 3 years, knowing what Nigeria is, and say he's not going to pay you interest. Does he know where you take the money from? So you see, there is going to be also argument here. So for professionals who probably will find themselves in public sector, please, let's enlighten our employer. Let's get this thing, let's be fair. If you're a professional, whether in the private sector, in the public sector, wherever you find yourself, the ethical standard makes you, it states that you have to be competent. The competency is understanding these things. Nobody, there is nowhere in the world, because it's not contained in the contract, you tell me that, okay, I have submitted this and I'm going to pay you that. It will not happen. Thank you very much.
Well, on the final note for me, there are some basic issues that have come up. One, for me, and I've been saying this for a while now, is the need for mutual respect for all the participants. The QS in consulting, the QS in public service who are acting for government as the employer, or the QS who work for developers or big corporations who engage consulting QS, as well as the QS in contracting or subcontracting firms. In fact, they are the ones that bear the burden of would I call it disrespect? Some of us in the consulting will load it over the ones in contracting. We are all supposed to be partners in the progress. The beauty of it that most of us don't understand is we see the employer or the client as our ultimate employer rather than the project. What we should be after is the success of the project. Because it's once a project is completed that you can be proud to list it on your CV as a project that you worked on and was completed. But if there is any dispute on the project and that project is not completed, can you list it? You can't. You have a project that started 10 years ago that up to today has not been completed. Are you going to write it in your CV? You understand? Because you may be unlucky, for instance, if you write it and the man you have written to knows about the project and is aware that the project has been abandoned and is wondering that if you work on the project that is abandoned, you want me to come and engage you to come and abandon my project? It won't work. So if we all look at issues from that perspective, that if we all work together in the atmosphere of mutual respect, we can see to the completion of every project within time and the resources that are available. I'm sure we'll move a long way, because the question raised by the lady about a consultant forcing somebody on them is also out of disrespect. And I also think there was something that QS Aminu Suleiman said in his own presentation about us. And now I'm addressing the QS in contracting and subcontracting. For every project, study, I'm sure even QS in our presentation yesterday also made mention, study the documents very well. Look at the clauses. Don't assume. You see, what most of us do, immediately we get the BOQ, we rush to price without checking the conditions that are attached to the contract. And then by the time you sign, you get your boss to sign, and then you turn around. I saw one contract lately, the contractors, they had issues. When I looked at the contract, I asked the contractor, incidentally, it's an expatriate firm. I said, why did you sign this contract? It was so lopsided against them. They were not allowed to make any claims for fluctuation or whatever. And they went and signed. And now they had issues. The contract was even awarded in the just when COVID started. So there were so many issues, and they were looking for ways to wriggle out. And the condition was there that this one, I said, look, you cannot tie my hand and then say I should fight. Is that possible? You can't tie my hand and say I should fight. That's already frustration. But if we are taking pain, he said, yes, they saw it. I said, then why did you sign? So it builds on all of us here who work for contracting organizations. When we study those contracts or those documents and we see those issues, let's raise it up with our guy. If the man says he wants to go and put his head on the chopping block, put it down in writing to him as a memo, so that if there are problems in future, he will not blame it on you. So on that note, I want to thank all of us for being patient all throughout this two-day workshop, and I hope we are all taking something home with us. So I want to, where's SPDL? Well, maybe I want to invite the Deputy President. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think there is one final responsibility I must do before I ask the, well, I was thinking maybe the DP can move the photo of thanks and then we'll do this, take a group photograph and close. While somebody helps us to locate the SPDL and the officer. Where is QS David Ubong? David. Can somebody help us look for? Yes, please come forward. So while we are waiting for him, I think in order to just abridge everything, the DP can go ahead and move the vote of thanks.
Vote of thanks. Then after that, they will do this. Mr. President, NEC members, fellows, and distinguished colleagues, we, in the last 2 days, I'm sure we can vouch that we've had 2 rewarding days. 2 rewarding days, fully loaded, fully packed with knowledge. And knowledge does not come cheaply. Knowledge, anywhere, you can't get it cheaply. But I can tell you, when I listened to the SPDL, said that when he went to do a course with the QS Academy, a course that cost him several, is it pounds or dollars, you said? Dollars. And that same quality of training he got with the QS RBN, sorry, the QS Academy, that we are getting it here at a very low amount of money. It means that quantity surveyors, wherever you are, I want to appeal to those of you who have the privilege to be at this workshop, to become crusaders. Crusaders in quotes. You go and tell other quantity surveyors, look, we need to make it as a habit to attend the Institute organized workshops, because those workshops are gotten at very low amount of money. On this note, Mr. President, I would like to say that I want to thank you particularly, because it is out of your leadership that this has manifested. It shows that you are leading the Institute in the right direction. You are giving the Institute the desired knowledge so that we can ever remain competitive in this ever-changing world. So I thank you, Mr. President. And in these 2 days, you've been here with us. SPDL, Mr. President wouldn't have been able to do all this without your industry. Means that you are doing very well. And in my place, they say when a man is doing very well, is what? More work. In my place, they say when a man is doing very well, is what? More work. So, SPDL, it is up to you to hear very well that everybody here has formed a consensus that it is more work, because you have done very well. You are giving them the right recipe, the right knowledge at the right time. So thank you very much, SPDL. Our resource persons, what can we do without you? Some of you flew back from America. I know one particular one who, I'm sure that in the whole of the state, they are looking for him now, because he's so precious to the state that I don't know whether the 2 days he has stayed here has cost the state, I'm sure it has cost the state some fortune. The person I'm talking knows himself very well. So I want to thank our resource persons. I can't mention all of you by name, though some of you have left. But we are so very grateful to all of you, because what you are doing here is something ordinarily you know how much you will be taking home elsewhere. But because you are one of us, you are coming here to bequeath the knowledge almost at nothing. So we thank you, and we are looking forward when next we invite you. You will be willing and ready as always to come and support the Institute. So we thank you, and to all of us who have gotten the knowledge. When you get knowledge, you put it into what? Practice. I went, Mr. President, I don't know if I can say this. I went to do an MSc program as a full-grown adult. And when I finished the MSc program, I looked at it. I felt that I could make money out of it. I started making money with my MSc thesis. Everywhere I go, I will package it, I will sell it. They will say, this is beautiful. Come. I said, so this thing works. So this knowledge you have gathered, it is up to you to package it and begin to make money with it. So it's not for you to keep. When you get the materials, you go and keep it somewhere and it will be, doors will build on it. No. It is for you to look at it and begin to make money with it. So every one of us, I believe in these last 2 days, our knowledge has been upscaled. So let us put it into practice. And they say practice does what? Practice makes perfect. So I thank everyone, and I don't know, some of us, I believe in the next couple of 1 hour, we will return here to do the inauguration. And those who will not return, as all of us return back to our various destinations, I wish each and every one of us journey mercies. And don't forget, in the next 2-3 months, we are going to have the biggest event of the Institute. The biggest event of the Institute, and that is the biennial conference, the BEGM. It means it is also the period for us to elect our leaders. So I want to specially invite, Mr. President, I can invite them again. I want to specially invite everyone here. Okay, by the authority of Mr. President, I compel everyone who is here, God keeping us alive. You are mandated to attend the BGM. And Mr. President has said I should let everyone, even if you are a fellow, you are not there, your certificate will be withdrawn. Your certificate will be withdrawn. Your certificate will be. I almost was going to commit a very serious blunder, and that would have been very, very unfair. The chapter, the Edo chapter, Mr. President, sir. You know, that whisper, somebody whispered to me. I don't know if I can say this again, Mr. President. The whisper. Okay, sir. The whisper, somebody whispered to me that this is just a tip of what Edo can do. That we should go back and consider bringing the BGM to Edo. These 2 days is almost like a justification of that whispering. So I want to, on this note, thank the chapter chairperson, the Senate of Edo State, the past chairman of Edo State, and all the members of Edo State for this very well-packaged national workshop. You did very well. You did very well. We can't say anything less than this. You did very well. You have given us something to go and tell other people, look, go and take a clue from Edo chapter. So, Mr. Chairperson, and all your Senate and all the past chairmen, we are indeed very grateful. Thank you, and we believe your request, it is not rested on Mr. President's shoulder. I'm sure Mr. President will find opportunity to look at it. So we thank everyone, and we look forward when we return this evening. Those who will come, please invite your friends, invite your colleagues, And the senior members who are here, if you are not returning back and you are sleeping in Port Harcourt this night, you are cordially... Sorry, if you are sleeping in Benin, Mr. President, I recall the way the Esama Global was, was almost turning QS Faith Ezugo, almost like an errand person. And I saw, Mr. President, you got very worried. Suddenly you brought out your handkerchief, you started wiping your face. So I was wondering why Mr. President was sweating. Mr. President got very worried when he saw what was happening. But we thank God, Mr. President, we came out of it. we came out of it. So every one of us, if you know you will pass the night, please, you are specially invited to this inauguration. Thank you and God bless everyone.
Thank you very much, sir. I think the presentation, who is doing?
I may decide to move the headquarters or the secretariat of the NIQS to Benin for another 2 weeks. That is to say that I will be resident in Benin for another 2 weeks. It's like they don't want me to stay. So don't worry, I'll leave. I'll leave tomorrow. Yes, I think now to the tradition. Yeah. Well, QS Chijioke Wago. Yeah. Well, on behalf of the Nigerian Institute of Quanitity Surveyors, I hereby present to you QS Chijioke Wago, in appreciation of your contribution and support to the success of the Nigerian Institute of Quanitity Surveyors 2-day national workshop, for the wonderful presentation you made as a resource person. Thank you very much. Jami, my brother. Jamabi Nombere, the deputy chairman of Rivers, he knows how to spoil people that you will forget where you are. When I was in Rivers last year, I shouldn't be saying this. The man spoiled me, but it's between the two of us. When I went to Yenago, I repeated the same thing. God forgive me my sins. Anyway, he's receiving this award on behalf of QS Alabo George Kelly, FNIQS. I'm sure if QS Kelly himself had been here, he couldn't have done much better than what Jamie has done. Well, although this has the name of Alabo George, but take it that it's also meant for you because you did wonderfully well, that you owned the paper. So on behalf of the Nigerian Institute of Quanitity Surveyors, I want to sincerely appreciate and thank you. Incidentally, he was meant to have made this presentation yesterday, but because of the visit to the Esama of Benin, he couldn't, and we shifted it today. I'm sure maybe he had planned to travel first thing this morning, but here he is at this time. And for that sacrifice, I want to also thank you, QS Jamie Numeri, and in appreciation, please kindly present this to QS Dr. Alabo George Kelly on our behalf. Thank you. And I should also mention that we are also grateful for his generous contribution to this program. He also gave some financial support. I think I ought to also mention that he not only did he make a paper presentation, he also made a Naira presentation. So we are grateful, so extend gratitude, immense gratitude to him. to the big fish himself. The man who came all the way from US to come and present this paper. We are honored to have big men amongst us. If not for the shenanigans they had in APC, he would have been one of our senators that we would have been running to in the National Assembly. But where God has his own way of doing things, maybe if he had been a senator, he had been elected, we won't have him here to come and share knowledge. So when you lose some way, you gain some way. He lost, but we gained. Is that not so? Thank you. So on behalf of the Nigerian Institute of Quantity Surveyors, QS Aminu Suleiman, we appreciate you for your presentation and we would like to present this to you as a token of our appreciation. Thank you very much.
Please come for a group photograph with the president, the presenter, CJ. Yes, please can we just do that quickly?
It was pouring to.
Oh, the photograph, please. Other members can join them, please. Very quickly, VP, the senior members, Augasta, you join them. The fellows in the house, please, can you quickly join them? Yes, past chairman of Edo, can we join the picture? QS Nuruddin. QS Nuruddin, he was here before. Yes, QS Nuruddin from Edo, chapter chairperson, yes. And then I'm being told that members of Waxin, you also come forward for a group photograph, please. Waxin members. Waxin members, please. You can come and join your chairperson. Waxin, come and join your chairperson. Please. Waxin. We expect to see more Waxin presentation during the BGM. I'm sure it's a challenge that Waxin members will. Waxin, join the president and your chairperson. You're not joining Waxin? You should join them. Waxin, sir. No, you have to. Waxin, the presidency should join Waxin, please. Waxin. Yes. Waxin members. Okay. My constituency will also come for a group photograph. Young Quantity Surveyors Forum, please line up immediately after Waxin. Then we will have members of Edo State chapter. Young Quantity Surveyors, go for your picture. Then members of Edo State chapter will follow. The YQSF. Waxing members who are members of YQSF, those who are young should stay back. Waxing members that are young, you can stay back. YQSF, please, immediately after, we will have members of Edo State chapter. Members of Edo State chapter, please. Members of Edo State chapter. Thank you, YQSF. Members of Edo State chapter. Members of Edo State chapter. Members of Edo State chapter. The host chapter. The host chapter, please. The host chapter. The host chapter. Edo State chapter. Edo State chapter. After them, all members can join. I mean, those interested in snapping with the president, all members can join now. All members, please, you stay where you are. Other members should join. Members, the general picture now, so that you remember Edo 2023. There are plenty things to recollect. All members should please join.
When make I come home.